September 22nd of Wheat Ridge City Council. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would the city clerk please do roll call?
Jerry DiTullio.
Here.
Bud Starker.
Present.
Zachary Urban.
Present.
Christy Davis.
Here.
Tim Fitzgerald.
Here.
Tracy Langworthy. I didn't hear from her.
Tracy's out of-
Genevieve
out of the
Wooden.
Present.
Excuse me?
Tracy's out of the city. I did get a letter from
Oh,
her.
okay. Genevieve Wooden
Present.
and George Pond.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. It's time for approval of the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes?
Madam Mayor, I have one change to the minutes. On the item, it was the public hearing and ordinance on second reading for Council Bill number 09, 2014. In the approval of that ordinance or that bill, there had been an amendment made by Mr. DiTullio and seconded by myself, which talked about having staff work with Denver Water about the possibility of leaving the water easement unpaved. And, and actually it was Consolidated Mutual and not Denver Water, to the extent that they're different and have different things going on. But if the,
I did-
if the clerk would-
Councilmember Starker and I talked about this, and I appreciate the correction and that part about the working with the Denver Water Board was a separate motion, and I'll make that correction.
Be sure when everybody speaks, use the microphone and get close to it if necessary. So the clerk will make the changes in the minutes.
Pardon me?
So as clerk, you will make the change in the minutes.
Yes.
All right. Then,
Sir,
yes.
can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir?
Do we have the ability to turn up the microphones? Let's see if we can do that. Okay. All right, give it a little bit. We're going to attempt to turn up the microphones. If a feedback occurs, then we will have to get it back down, because with feedback, you won't be able to hear anything.
Madam Mayor.
And Mr. DiTullio.
Actually, Ms. Shaver, it was an amendment to the main motion to allow staff work with Consolidated Mutual Water.
I understand that. Are you just going to accept that correction or have a motion to approve them as corrected?
Madam
You won't
Mayor,
need
with that correction, I move that the minutes are approved.
Thank you. And do we have a second on that
Second.
correction? Thank you. Please vote to approve the minutes.
Motion carries 6-1 with Mr. Pond abstaining.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone who's present here to please turn off your cell phone, particularly this evening, since there are many of you here. Please do turn off your cell phone. We're going to move to proclamations and ceremonies. And tonight, I'm pleased to introduce retired sheriff and president of the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, Mr. Grayson Robinson, to tonight's City Council presentation to honor our Police Department's second Accreditation Award for achieving full law enforcement accreditation.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Grayson Robinson, and it is absolutely my distinct privilege and honor to come before you this evening. As you mentioned, Madam Mayor, I represent CALEA. CALEA is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We are an international law enforcement public safety accreditation body. We monitor and look at the compliance of law enforcement agencies across the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Barbados relative to a very large body of very well-defined, evidence-based best practices that have to do with state-of-the-art public safety services. I am very honored to come before you this evening and recognize once again the Wheat Ridge Police Department. The Wheat Ridge Police Department has once again been recognized with full accreditation. The accreditation signifies their compliance with a very large number of standards and best practices that we as a commission monitor on a regular basis. In order for us to ensure the accreditation status of law enforcement agencies, and particularly the Wheat Ridge Police Department, teams of auditors come into your community on a regular basis. These are men and women that are trained auditors and assessors around our standards, and they evaluate your police department and their compliance from your police department on those standards. The fact of the matter that you and the Wheat Ridge Police Department have gone through the accreditation process sets you far apart. Across the United States and Canada and our service community, there are less than 1,200 law enforcement agencies that have achieved the level of accreditation that the Wheat Ridge Police Department has achieved and continues to maintain. A great source of pride, without question. But it also sends a message to your community that your police department conducts their business and serves their community with the best practices and evidence-based practices in mind. And in order to do that, by bringing in the assessors, Chief Brennan and the men and women of the Wheat Ridge Police Department are confident enough in the work that they do that they will bring in outside assessors to do a critical review of your organization. They have done that consistently, and as I have mentioned, your police department continues to be accredited at some of the highest levels. A great source of pride. It is my honor to join you this evening and present the certificate to members of the police department, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Chief Brennan, we're all very proud of you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm very proud of my team, and I'd just like to bring the team of department members that was responsible for ensuring this accreditation forward so they can be recognized as well. So if my team would come forward. And as they come forward, I just had a couple comments, Mayor and Council and citizens of Wheat Ridge. I'm very honored to stand before you tonight to accept this department's second award from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement in receipt of our Advanced Law Enforcement Accreditation on behalf of your police department. As Sheriff Robinson noted, there are over 17,000 federal, state, county, and municipal law enforcement agencies in this country alone, not including Canada, Mexico, or Barbados. And we're one of just under 1,200 law enforcement agencies that have achieved that. And I think that this achievement matches up with our vision. Our vision as a police department is exceptional people providing exceptional service. And I think this award tonight demonstrates, in part, our commitment to you of our pursuit of professional excellence. It signifies that your police department is committed to adhering to the very best business practices. It does not mean that we're perfect, but it does mean that we try to adhere to the very best business practices in law enforcement in terms of achieving administrative and operational goals. It means that we work hard at trying to improve our relationship and our transparency with this community and our surrounding communities. It means that we're willing to strengthen our accountability not only to our elected officials, but to our community and also our accountability within our organization. It means that we adhere to the very best management and business and leadership practices found in law enforcement today. It means that we strive to reduce risk, exposure, and liabilities, and it ensures that our employees receive the very best training, particularly in areas of constitutional law and use of force, so that they can go out there and do the difficult job of providing public safety and law enforcement services. Achieving national accreditation status is not an easy task. It requires a commitment and an exceptional team of individuals to demonstrate compliance each year during a 3-year accreditation cycle. The individuals that stand behind me and others who weren't able to make it here tonight represent a team of individuals who work led to a successful reaccreditation and in my belief, an exceptional award for not only the Wheat Ridge Police Department, but the city of Wheat Ridge and its community. So please join me again in thanking the men and women of the Wheat Ridge Police Department for a job well done. Thank you.
That's quite an honor for our city. Tonight we have really two meetings. The first meeting will be our regular business meeting, and then we're going to have a study session. It's like a special study session. And at our regular business meeting, we will conduct our regular business, and there will be time for public comment. But because the special study session to follow will be about the marijuana discussion, we will limit our public comment at the business meeting to items not regarding that. And I think we may need a motion to do that. Do you have, is that a possibility?
Yes, because we have two meetings tonight, and the second meeting is a study session, and there's no discussion really direct about 38th and Miller tonight. I move that any public comment concerning marijuana not be allowed during this regular business meeting, since timed public comment will be allowed at the study session following this meeting tonight.
Please poll the council.
Motion, I cleared it. You voted yes, right? Yeah. I cleared it. Okay, now vote. Motion carries 7-0.
And what that's all about, it's just that because for time and the ability for the council to really be able to dig into the question later on. And later on, when we do have, as you all know, we will have two sessions of public comment, as well as we have some presentations during that session, which is the study session following this meeting. And that's really not a discussion about 38th and Miller. It's about information for the council to be making some very serious decisions regarding how we're handling marijuana in our city and what we need to do to make it as equal as we can for all parties. So I would like to go on with the business meeting and ask for public comment. This would be on items that are not on tonight's business agenda. Do I have speakers for that? Because we don't have a list tonight. Please give your name and address.
Chief, are these your glasses anyway? This is Nancy Snow, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Wheat Ridge United Neighborhoods. We have been giving an election forum almost every year, I think since 1991. So I would like to invite everybody here, all of you, and at home, please to come to the election forum on Thursday, October 9th at 7 in the evening. We will have the candidates for CD7. Everybody's accepted already. Colorado Senate District 20, Colorado House District 24, the State Board of Education, RTD, and then, as far as I know, every contested seat at the county, you know, the sheriff, et cetera. And then at the end, we will have pro and con statements of the two issues on the Wheat Ridge ballot this year. So I would like you all to come. Very much, you get something you can't get any other way. You can hear the speakers in person, not just those hundreds of slick, shiny handouts you get at your home. Anyway, hope you'll all come, and I hope the council will come. And please remember that the people come that night, half of them at least, will be an elected official afterwards. Thank you.
Nancy, could you repeat that date and time and location again?
It's Thursday, October 9th, starting at 7, right here in these council chambers. And for those of you who've never been here before, they are televised and shown live that night. And it's a little late this year. They have informed me they will probably re-show it a couple of times a day until Election Day.
Thank you very
So,
much.
please come. And again, I have somebody's glasses.
Okay. 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 Got you. Are there other speakers for the items that are not on the agenda, on the business agenda for tonight?
Yes. Madam Mayor, Council, thanks for letting us speak here tonight. My name is Jim Stevens, and many of you probably know me. I'm an artist and an author. I live here in Wheat Ridge. I live at 3402 Reed Street. And this is Francis Torres. In addition to being an artist, I'm also the vice chair of the American Council of the Blind for Colorado. And we have encountered a growing problem, and it's impacting in our community as well, the Wheat Ridge community. It's not well known, but pretty alarming that 1 in 3 seniors age 65 and over, we're discovering, are experiencing serious vision disease. It's a new, unresolved problem as yet, but it's affecting communities all over. It's also affecting Wheat Ridge. It may be affecting someone that we all know in our community. We're here to invite you, Mayor Jay and the council, to join with us for what's known as the Raising Cane event. It's October 15th at 5 p.m. on the Capitol steps downtown, and it's a 7-block mini walk from the Capitol steps to the Broker Restaurant downtown, and it's to raise money for the American Council of the Blind for Colorado's Sight for Seniors program. We're actually the only organization that comes into the community to help seniors who've recently lost their eyesight to adjust and stay within their community rather than ending up in a home somewhere. And this is our fundraiser each year. It coincides with the Colorado National White Cane Day. It's just 7 blocks, and you might think, well, there's got to be a twist to it, and there is. We challenge you to take the walk with us blindfolded with a white cane, but don't worry. We put everyone with a sighted guide, and we're going to make sure that you don't fall down. And your courage to make the walk, it'll actually be a fun experience. Everyone who makes the walk always talks about how unique it was and what an eye-opening experience it was for them to realize what I go through every day, but what people who are just now beginning to lose their eyesight, and these may be our own family members here in our community, it's tragic. And this is the fundraiser on October 15th at 5 o'clock downtown, and trust me, you'll enjoy it. There are going to be city and state officials that have already committed to walk in the event. And what we'd like to do is leave these for the council members and the mayor to join up, sign up to walk with us.
Jim, I believe
I
you're at
think
3
that's
minutes, so.
that's it. We just wanted to invite you to join us and keep our elderly community in our community rather than in a home somewhere. We are the only organization that goes to their homes.
Thank you, Jim.
If you sign up for the walk, you can sign up at ACBCO, it's American Council of the Blind for Colorado, acbco.org. You can sign up there. It's $20 to sign up and walk with us.
That would be fine. This is called Raising Cane Walkathon, right?
We'll leave some on the back table here.
Well, there's going to be some on the back table for those of you who are interested.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have another, this will be another speaker for item not on the agenda tonight. And please remember, we do have to ask you to stay at 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm a business owner on 38th Ave.
I'm sorry, your name, sir?
Mark Eskow, 7100 38th Ave.
Thank you.
ESKOW. I'm a business owner on 38th Ave, and I support 2B. I support 2B because I believe in our community. I believe Wheat Ridge wants and needs a main street, somewhere safe to gather and build relationships with new friends and old. I believe the people of Wheat Ridge can support our main street economically as we build for the people. We could still build a community around the people, for the people. One thing I've learned about the community of Wheat Ridge is that we are a loyal bunch. And for that, I am grateful. And I'm sure other business owners in Wheat Ridge would agree with me. I've seen tremendous community support for all the events held on 38th Ave. And as a resident, I look forward to many more. Tonight, I'd like to share with you some information I think is important regarding the safety of the people of 38th Ave as we move forward. I have a study from the Wheat Ridge Fire Department. This was put before and after the road diet. They collected data on the response times. Since the road diet was in place, the response times are faster. To be specific, 37 seconds faster. In an emergency situation, that can go a long way. Also, Exempla Lutheran Hospital has reviewed, approved, and fully supports 2B. As I stated earlier, I'm an owner on 38th Ave. I live alongside the corridor. I am 100% committed to the community of Wheat Ridge, and I support 2B. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other speakers with items not on tonight's agenda?
Good evening. My name is John Clark. I live at 4665 Swadley Street. I want to talk just for a minute or two about revenue and ballot measures 2A and 2B. I appreciate the fact that it's a divided issue. There's some for, some against. Later, I can't wait for this whole pot thing. I'm just all excited. And later, you're going to hear about what was in your packet, I think, about page 2, about tax revenue and where the city gets its tax revenue. And I think the city manager said about $97 million in 2013 was pot revenue, pot tax revenue. And I just wanted to relate that to 2A and 2B. And under ballot measure 2B for the 38th Avenue corridor, and its $9.6 million price tag, the pot tax revenue could fund the entire project in just 103 years. So under 2A, this is the one where I need to slow down the math for you, but it's a $40 million bond issue. And I understand it's for infrastructure, roads, hook ramps, etc. But the repayment is right at $70 million. Over 10 years, that leaves $30 million just in interest. We're going to pay $30 million to service this debt. That $97,000 in the pot revenue, it could pay a whopping 11.8 days of the interest payments on that debt every year. 12 days of interest. That leaves 353 more days of interest to pay after we use the pot tax revenue. Plus, we still got to pay the principal back. So think about that later when you talk about the pot. Hopefully, I get a chance to come back up and talk to you about something else. But I just don't think we're ready to sacrifice our children to pay 12 days of interest on a loan. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional speakers?
My name is Patty Lazari. I live at 4175 Garland Street, right on the Greenbelt.
That was pretty quick. Our clerk needs to get that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Slowly. I live at 4175 Garland Street. It's right on the Clear Creek Recreational Path. Lazari.
Could you spell that, please?
LAZZARI.
Thank you.
Now, I know that we have a busy agenda tonight, but I would like to have someone make a note at a future meeting if we could discuss maybe returning the right-of-way triangular signs on the Greenbelt path, because I go there and many of us from our community walk that path, and it's getting kind of dangerous because the bicyclers are very exuberant and excited, and we love them for that, but they're almost running over children and families and other people walking dogs, because, you know, when you have a group of people walking or a family walking with little kids, they're kind of taking over more the path. And a lot of times the bicycle riders are not calling out on your left or on your right anymore. And at one point I kind of lost my temper because he almost ran over a little child. So I would like us to think about that in the near future, because we used to have them on the Greenbelt. I don't know what happened. Probably the vandalism that's been going on there. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patty, and I see our city manager is making note of that. Other speakers? Items not on the agenda? It looks like we don't have any more. Okay, we're going to move on to the business meeting, starting with item number 1, resolution. Oh, first of all, is there any changes to the agenda, tonight's agenda? Seeing none, it's approved as it is written. Now we move on to resolution number 1. Mr. Pond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to introduce resolution number 52, 2014, a resolution approving a 13-lot subdivision plat with a right-of-way dedication for property zone residential 1 at 3301 and 3345 Quail Street, case number WS-14-02, Quail Hollow. At issue, the applicant is requesting approval of a 13-lot subdivision plat for property zoned R1 at 3301 and 3345 Quail Street.
This is a public hearing, so I need to swear in anyone who wishes to speak, be it staff or the applicant, or particularly any citizens who wish to speak on this item. This is on the subdivision. Okay, we do have. Standing, would you please repeat, you just need to say I do. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth as you understand it? In group you said I do. Thank you. May I have a staff report?
See it on.
Good evening. For the record, Meredith Reckert, Wheat Ridge Community Development Department, and tonight I'm presenting case number WZ-14-02. This is a request for approval of a subdivision plat for property located at 3301 and 3345 Quail Street. I'd like to enter into the record the zoning ordinance, case file and packet materials, and the contents of this digital presentation. The property is located within the city of Wheat Ridge, and all proper posting and notification requirements have been met. Therefore, City Council has jurisdiction to hear this case. This is a vicinity map, sort of laying out what is happening with the property. The property doesn't really have or a portion of it doesn't have direct street frontage. So I put together this exhibit to try to walk you through where we are. North is located at the top. Down here on the bottom is 32nd Avenue. Quail Street comes up and goes north. 33rd Avenue is at this location right here. This is the Applewood Baptist Church parking lot. And the two pieces that we're discussing tonight are located right here, where the arrow is pointing at 3301 Quail and 3345 Quail. So again, the property is comprised of two parcels. The larger piece, which is the property behind the Applewood Baptist Church, is currently vacant. It has 7.8 acres. Lena Gulch traverses the property at the northwest corner, and there's some 100-year floodplain for Lena Gulch at that location. Currently, the parcel does not have street frontage. However, another parcel, which is 3345, has been incorporated into the subdivision so that appropriate right-of-way can be dedicated. The 3345 Quail Street property is 1.26 acres, and again, in order to meet the requirement for right-of-way dedication, we had to include this piece so it could be cut off. There's an existing house on the property, and the southern portion is vacant, and it will become a part of the new development and will provide another development lot right there on Quail Street. Let's see, moving on. This is a copy of the zoning map. This is a 2012 aerial. Again, north is to the top. What the yellow color represents is the zoning in the area. Again, the site is outlined in red, and you can see that in the locality that all of the property in the area is zoned R2, or excuse me, R1. There are a variety of land uses. To the south is the Applewood Baptist Church parking lot. We've got some, the Lena Gulch to the north, and then some various single-family subdivisions around the property. So moving quickly through some slides. This slide is taken standing on Quail Street looking west. This is the approximate location of where the street will come in. This slide complements of Google Earth is looking northwest. You can see the existing, I guess it's the posting sign for the property, or perhaps a realty sign. The shed is located right where the street will be extended from Quail Street to the west. And then finally, I was standing on the cul-de-sac bulb for Route Street when I took this, looking back towards the property. That would be to the northeast. And again, you can see the trees and some of the natural features on the property. So this is a three-sheet subdivision plat. The first one is what I always call the declaration sheet, and it contains things like legal descriptions and signature blocks and easement language, sort of the housekeeping stuff for the plat. This is the second page of the plat. I'm going to walk you around it. This time, north is over on the left-hand side of the property. This street, which is 33rd Avenue, comes in from Quail Street and extends all the way to the west to the boundary of the subdivision. There is a single cul-de-sac bulb that comes off called Quail Court. The lots you can see are arranged around Quail Court, and then there are two other lots that come off the 33rd Avenue extension. We have dead-ended the street at this location. However, if there were any sort of development proposal for additional vacant property to the west, they could tie into this. Both Quail Court and 33rd Avenue are going to be full-width dedicated streets with curb gutter and attached sidewalk installed on both sides of the streets. There are numerous tracks shown on the property. Tract A, which is up here in the northwest corner of the property, encompasses Lena Gulch and its floodplain. There are additional tracts that contain a stormwater pond. There's also eyebrows, what we call eyebrows, for the cul-de-sac, that if after the cul-de-sac is built and the property developed, the street is extended, we can vacate those back to those property owners. And finally, track G is part of the open conveyance of the drainage on the property. This third sheet is the portion that I talked about that's located along Quail. And again, north is to the top. This is Quail Street as it extends north from 32nd Avenue. And this is West 33rd as it ties into Quail Street. I took the two pieces of the sheets 2 and 3 and put them together to give you a better idea how it all flows together. So this time, north is to the top. Quail Street is over here. 33rd Avenue comes in at this location and goes into the cul-de-sac for Quail Court, and then West 33rd Avenue extends over to the west. So there are a total of 13 lots, which will be result in 12 new home sites. The drainage is accommodated in a pipe that runs along the eastern property of the subdivision over in this location, and also through a natural channel at this location. Coming here and then extending to Lena Gulch, we believe that does provide an amenity for the subdivision. There will be no encroachment of the development parcels into the 100-year floodplain. And finally, all lots meet or exceed the R1 development standards. Planning Commission reviewed this at a public hearing held on August 21st. They did give a recommendation of approval, and they included 3 conditions. The first condition is that a subdivision improvement agreement be executed regarding public improvements. The second one was the developer pay parks fees at the time of recording. And then finally, that the HOA covenants be reviewed and approved by staff. This case has been through a standard referral process, and all agencies have indicated that they can serve the subdivision with improvements installed by the developer. Those would include Consolidated Mutual Water, the Wheat Ridge Fire Protection District, Northwest Lakewood Sanitation District, Xcel Energy, and the Wheat Ridge Police Department. The Wheat Ridge Parks Department, as you're aware, anytime we do get a subdivision for new residential development, there is an assessment that's done as far as future parks needs for the new residents. The Parks Department has given a recommendation to request fees in lieu of land dedication in the amount of just a little bit over $32,000 for future park needs. The Wheat Ridge Public Works Department has reviewed and approved the plat and the drainage report. So that concludes staff comments. We are given a recommendation of approval with the same 3 conditions that were included in the Planning Commission motion. And those 3 conditions that I've got listed here on the screen are also included in your recommended motion in the council action form. So that concludes staff comments at this point, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Meredith. Does the council have questions? Yes, we do. Mr. Pond.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Meredith, for the presentation. I have 1 or 2 questions. West 33rd Avenue, the new extension that's indicated to the west on this plat. I tried to look through the minutes of the Planning Commission and through the staff report to understand whether or not there was a conversation and/or staff looking at traffic impacts from the 12 properties. That's my first question, if that discussion took place at all.
Well, we always look at traffic and drainage anytime we have any new development proposals. At this point, we did not require, I've got Mark Westberg with me, who's in the Public Works Department. We did not see that there would be the potential for traffic impacts. The local street system can handle the traffic which would be generated by the 12 new households. That ends up being about 120 trips per day in and out of the subdivision, and we believe that the surrounding street system can handle that.
So the second question and/or the second part of that question on the same lines is if the new portion of West 33rd Avenue was extended to the west, as you've indicated, is something that is in some ways being considered by the eyebrows on these 2 properties. depending on the size of the future expansion, is there a thought that there would be a point where the traffic impacts to Quail or existing West 33rd would be so much that you would try to come off of 38th, or any discussions?
No, actually, if you ran 33rd straight over, it coincides with the Route Street cul-de-sac bulb. And so 38th Avenue would not be needed access.
Thank you.
Other questions from other council members of staff? Do we have thank you, Eric. Do we have is the applicant present and may wish to do any sort of a presentation?
They are present, and I know they would like to respond to comments from council or questions, if there are any.
Hello. Right.
Sorry about this. Sorry about that. The flash drive isn't being recognized by the computer, unless we have the magic touch here by
Meredith? Excuse me, Meredith? We do have a question from council to you, so we can, Mr. Urban would like to ask you something.
Thank you. With respect to the park fees that are defined as $32,464, what were the metrics used to calculate that number?
some modifications to the subdivision regulations, I want to say about 6 months ago, and we established some constants as far as, how much lots would be worth depending on the type of development it would be, and then tried to apply a cost per unit. So with that new formula we use, it's about $2,500 per unit is where we got the 32,000.
Per residential lot, you mean?
Residential, yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes. I'll put back the subdivision plat design. Okay. There you go. Let's do it this way.
Good evening. My name is Bill Lyons.
I'm sorry, what is it again?
Bill Lyons.
Bill Lyons?
My office is at 6143 South Willow Drive, Greenwood Village, 80111. Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm pleased to pronounce the indication of our new project called Quail Hollow. And it is designed for the empty nesters in mind. All the homes here will be single-story homes ranging from 2,400 to 2,700 square feet. They'll be designed in a European style with tile roofs, stone, and stucco. They'll have 3 and 4 car garages. Meredith, I thought, did a pretty good job explaining the entire site, but we meet or exceed all the R1 requirements. The R1 zone, as you probably already know, are 12,500 square feet. Our average size is 16,500, and our smallest lot is 14,462. I'd like to, I appreciate everybody coming out to see the program tonight. So I think with Meredith's explanation, we had beautiful pictures and things of that nature. But I think at the end of the day, I think we stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Does council have questions of the applicant, Mr. Bill Lyons? No. Okay. We may call you back. We have some public comment or public questions regarding this application. I saw two on the sign-up sheets for a couple of people that wanted to discuss this. Are they?
Someone's raising their hand.
Oh, I can't see them. Where are they? Please come up to the podium. There's so many people out there.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Gibbard, and I reside at 3415 Quayle Street.
I'm sorry, sir. Would you spell your last name?
Gibbard.
Thank
I've attended many of the meetings for this. Also, I've never understood why they have to bring 6 feet of fill dirt in on this property to build the homes on. And also, when the planning committee, it was very close, 4-3. So there was obviously 3 people who really didn't agree with what was going on there. Also, I don't quite understand where the drainage is going to be on this. If I understood something from this gentleman just now, or from Meredith, that there's going to be a drainage on the
Please speak
east
into
side.
the microphone so we can.
Oh, on the east side of the street here, or on the east side of my property. I mean, I live there, and my property slopes down like this. Well, if it brings 6 feet in like this, and my property's down here, what's going to happen? I couldn't get no explanation from anybody on this. And also, on the drainage, they say, well, drainage is going to go off down in there into Lena Gulch. Well, there's going to be twice the moisture coming off from Quayle, from Upper Bilvers, up there above, onto this property. Now, all the water that comes down is absorbed by that property. Now, where's it going to go? They say it's going to go into but it's just going to make much more water rushing down there into Lena Gulch. And I think one lady was very concerned about that who was on the committee, and she said, you can hear that water rushing down, and we can now. At times you just hear that water just rushing down there. So, but I would like to know why they have to bring 6 feet of fill dirt in. To me, that doesn't sound logical. And also, when putting all this cement and all this tarmac and whatever you're going to put there, that's just going to put more stuff into the irrigation, well, not irrigation, into Lena Gulch. You know, what washes off there, fertilizer, all the stuff off of the roads, salt or whatever they want to use, it's just going to create one heck of a problem there. I mean, I've lived at my property now for 37 years. And now, just for example, yesterday I sat in my backyard and there was these trees there, and there was these eagles flying around in there, coming down, picking up stuff out there at the back there, and we see foxes, we see all sorts of things in that back property there. And it's so nice to think that Wheatridge would have more sense and want to keep a natural piece of property like that, where at first it was just enclosed, and after the church built that property, there, so there was nobody to get in there. So once they decided to do it, and I'll never forget what Meredith said to me once before this. I said, Meredith, what is it? She said, 12 more roofs. And I thought, what an answer to give somebody, 12 more roofs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? And yeah, I'll do a response. Do I have other public comment? And then I will ask the applicant to do a response if you wish to. We have someone else. I have a Zachary and a Bill also signed up. Please come to the mic. And if there's anybody else, please come to the mic to be ready.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm Linda Gibbard, and I've lived at 3415 Quayle Street.
The wife of Mr.
I am.
Right.
17 years. And the rhythm of that open space behind our house, the wildlife, the creatures that call that area home, is part of the quality of life that we find living in Wheatridge. So apparently, 12 more roofs, 13 more rooftops is more important than retaining this beautiful idyllic setting that we have to the west of our house. So I'm glad to hear that Meredith thinks that it's more important to build 13 rooftops in that space and destroy the peace and serenity of our lifestyle. Frankly, I think if this passes, I think all of you need to be required to spend as much time as you can listening to all the noise and dealing with all the dirt and the turmoil and the extra water that's going to be rushing into Lena Gulch. When you stand on the deck of our bedroom and we're having torrential rain, the sound of the water running through Lena Gulch is deafening. I mean, it is roaring. And it's just, when you pour all this concrete that you're planning on pouring, the runoff is just going to add to that. The water can't seep into the ground if it's concrete, concrete, concrete. And the other thing is, when you raise the question about traffic, I have to remember where I am, so let me get myself together here. When there is a school event, and there are lots of them at Prospect Valley Elementary School, we started counting cars parked around the surrounding streets. Quail Street, West 35th, West 35th, Parfit, 33rd Place, all the way up to 32nd Avenue. It is chocker. Sometimes we have counted between 300 and 400 cars parked on the side streets, and I mean the streets are so congested when there's a school event that you can't get down the street 2 cars together. You have to wait till somebody gives way to let you go down there. So we have...
Time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Just
you.
remember, we don't need more traffic.
Thank you.
And we don't want this bloody development.
This is a business meeting, and we do not encourage clapping or hooting or whatever. And when we get to the second portion, then I'll remind you that once again, that this is be respectful to the council who is trying to make some very serious decisions. All right, do we have someone else to speak?
Hi, Council. My name is Holly Heaton. I live at 10240 West 34th Avenue.
Spell your last name, please.
Heaton. I just have a couple of quick questions about this proposed development. Are these homes going to be custom, semi-custom, or track homes? And what is the price point going to be?
Okay. Well, the applicant will be ready to answer that question as well as the drainage problem. Do I have other speakers? Bill White or Zachary Fronts, something like that? No? Why don't you come on forward? And Bill, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. To answer the last young lady, they are, the price point's $900,000, so that should probably indicate what type of quality we're gonna have. They have 8-foot-high doors. Every single countertop in the home is granite. And we actually are also doing a full basement with a recreation area, pool table, and theater room. So I believe that would probably answer that young lady's question. And I'd like to make a comment. The one gentleman said we're bringing in 6 foot of fill. On average, we're bringing 3 feet. And I have an exhibit here. It should have been on the thumb drive. But where it butts his property, we're meeting his property line exactly at the same elevation. We're not jumping it up at his elevation.
Thank you very much. Meredith, do we need to, I don't know if Meredith's still here. Right. Are we comfortable with the drainage problem?
We actually Public Works has reviewed and approved a drainage report, the situation that the folks are talking about with the drainage that goes across the property now will be made better by installation of storm sewer that takes the water underground and above ground over to Lena Gulch. That's why Lena Gulch is there.
And
It's time for council to ask questions of either the applicant or, any other questions for the applicant or for Meredith?
Meredith, on the follow-up to the meeting here, it indicated that the revised subdivision plat is consistent with approval by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. Mark Westberg will step up to take care of that question. Thank you.
Mark Westberg, Public Works Department, City of Wheat Ridge. So what happened was the original plan was just to put 2 large pipes on the east side of the property to get the water from that southeast corner up to Lena Gulch directly and remove the natural channel that's in there today. The Corps of Engineers has changed their mind locally about removal of natural channels in situations like this within the last few years. They had approved the first proposal that came through several years ago, but they've got some new staff there, and they're just sort of as a whole looking at things differently. And what they required the applicant to do was to preserve the natural channel while still handling the larger storms. And so they've got at that south side of the road where the channel hits the property, they've got a little diversion structure that takes the everyday flows will continue to flow through the natural channel to keep it alive and viable and all those kind of things. If we get a really big event, then that's what goes into 250 or 54-inch pipes and then are piped directly to Lena Gulch. So that's what the Corps thing. They were ready to submit with it the other way, and then the Corps said, I don't think so, and they had to very quickly revise everything, and they did a great job of meeting the Corps' requirements and then also taking care of the drainage.
So the Army Corps of Engineers has reviewed this plat and is okay with it?
Yeah, and they reviewed the drainage design and looked at the flows that are being allowed to continue through the swale and all those things, and it's all they're all approved with it now.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions of staff or the applicant, we can go on to the motion and then have a discussion and more questions or comments can be made after that. George? Oh, wait, I need to close the public meeting. I'm now closing the public meeting.
Thank you. I move to approve resolution number 52-2014, a resolution approving a 13-lot subdivision plat with right-of-way dedication for property zone residential 1 at 3301 and 3345 Quail Street, case number WS-14-02 Quail Hollow, for the following reasons. 1, City Council has conducted a proper public hearing, which met all public notice requirements as required by Section 26-109 and 26-407 of the Code of Laws. 2, the requested subdivision has been reviewed by the Planning Commission, and their recommendation was forwarded for approval. 3, the subdivision plat is in compliance with the R1 Zone District Standards and Article 4 of Chapter 26 of the Code of Laws, with the following conditions. 1, a subdivision improvement agreement is executed whereby all public improvements are in place prior to issuance of building permits for individual lots. 2, the developer pays park fees at the time of plat recording in the amount of $32,464.77. And finally, 3, the homeowners association covenants are reviewed and approved by staff.
Second. We have a second. Is there further discussion before I call for the vote? Any questions or discussion on the part of the council? Let's go ahead and poll the council.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, which is our final item in tonight's business meeting, and then we'll go on to the special study session. Ms. Davis.
And I'm confident this will be a quick item. Motion to approve payment of sales tax increment share back for August of fiscal year 2014 from the Wheat Ridge Urban Renewal Authority Town Center project in the amount of $37,106.52 to Renewal Wheat Ridge. The 2014 August sales tax increment share back for Wheat Ridge Town Center due to Renewal Wheat Ridge totals $37,106 $106.52. Expenditures over $35,000 require city council approval. Motion in order?
Motion is in order.
I move to approve payment of sales tax increment share back for August of fiscal year 2014 from Town Center Project in the amount of $37,106.52 to Renewal Wheat Ridge.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a first and a second. Please poll the council. Is there any discussion? Please poll the council.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, that concludes our business meeting. We do have a few items to take care of, which we are part of the business meeting. The city manager's matters,
Nothing this evening, Mayor.
city attorney's matters,
None, thank you.
elected official matters. Any commentary from the elected officials tonight? Okay, let's go ahead and adjourn to the study session. And the study session will now be opened.
Madam Mayor, can you wait till I close the recording? I have to bring up some different documents.
That'll be fine. Do we need a break?
Oh, these
Let's have,
people standing up. I
no, let's not, can we just, let's not,
Let's get at least our speakers in place. And
yeah.
maybe we could talk about are we able to talk about?
Yeah. All right. Let's have a few ground rules so that we kind of know what we're going to go through tonight. Because there is a lot of people present, there's going to be two groups. The first section will be public comment on the matter we're looking at tonight, which is of course on the study session is about marijuana, and it is a information system for the council. We're not particularly going to be discussing a particular property, which is 38th and Miller. It is purely for information so that the city council can go down the road and make some important decisions about how marijuana is going to be regulated or continue to be regulated in our city. Because there are so many of you present, we have decided that we are open to public comment, of course, and we've restricted it to 10 minutes for the opposition and 10 minutes for the support. And in order to determine who goes first, we're going to have a flip of the coin. A lot of fun, which our city clerk will do, as well as call out which will be which. And then when we have a official presentation we have two parties who are informed on this matter, and they will give official presentations, which will be informational for the council, 20 minutes each, and they will reverse whichever way who spoke first will be reversed for that presentation. Once again, the rules apply. I believe we do have a police officer in the room. The rules apply. No yelling or screaming or loud clapping or sighs or whatever. This is a business meeting, and your council would like to concentrate purely on that, on the information versus the reaction of the crowd. So please be respectful of that decision and the work they will be doing. Now, I believe, are we ready for the flip of the coin?
You have your coin?
Oh. Please witness this, that the clerk has borrowed my coin here.
One side has the marijuana.
And she
leaf.
will also determine heads or tails, which would be.
You didn't tell me I had to make up all this. What? You mean
calling it?
Heads is for and tails is against?
That's right. Heads it's for. So whatever comes up is who will speak first. All right, those of you who are.
I do indeed.
All right, so this is the public portion, so I believe we would proceed with that. Ken, would that be correct?
Yes.
10 minutes?
Well, we have a couple staff presentations as well, so.
Okay.
I don't know if your preference, if you'd like those before.
Actually, on study sessions, the usual system is that the public speaks first. Am I correct about that? Yeah, so if you don't
Mayor,
mind.
if you would, presentation may help answer a lot of questions, though.
Okay,
And
so-
kind of get us off on a.
All right, I'll take the advisement and let the staff do a presentation first, which may help some of the questions
It
that will come
may
up.
help, as Mr. Goff says, set the stage for kind of the existing regulatory environment, how we got to where we are currently, and kind of what
that'll be-
options you're going to be considering, at least where we're starting you off
Okay.
for the discussion. So I'm gonna kick it off, and we're gonna go over a few things. This is kind of the outline of what we'd like to speak with tonight. As I mentioned,
Can everybody hear? I guess they can't. Please speak loudly into the
I will
microphone.
speak directly into the mic, and I apologize. I mean, to some extent, I hope this is just a function of our, or I fear this is just a function of our system. But I'm going to go over the regulatory history in Wheat Ridge, starting back in 2009, since we've been crafting regulations by council ordinance that pertain to marijuana, both medical and retail. I'm going to explain the existing regulatory environment, what you can and can't do, which is essentially where and how. What are the operational constraints, and what locations are permissible for different types of marijuana-related establishments. Going to go over what we've started with in terms of additional regulatory options for you to consider, and then finish with some kind of timing considerations for next steps in this process. As council is aware, I'll go over the dates more specifically, but we are under a temporary moratorium on the processing of any future applications for new marijuana establishments, and want to make you aware of kind of the logistics of the timing of moving any new regulations forward. Then I'm going to hand it off to Chief Dan Brennan, who has some data and a presentation relative to some crime statistics that we've been tracking relative to marijuana establishments. How is the volume for the audience? Is it better? Good, good. So starting with I have a couple slides on the history of regulation in Wheat Ridge that's been responsive, of course, to the constitutional amendments that the voters have passed at a state level, as well as various state statutes that have been adopted in response to those constitutional amendments, and then subsequent rules that have been adopted by the Department of Revenue at the state level. So in 2009, to get a better grasp on our regulatory environment, we placed a temporary moratorium on the processing of medical marijuana applications. That was the only type of marijuana establishments that were allowed at the time. It was later that the recreational or retail marijuana constitutional amendment was passed. So during the period of that temporary moratorium, we went through study sessions and public hearings before both the City Council and the Planning Commission to consider ordinances that would create a regulatory environment for medical marijuana establishments. So as I mentioned, we had a couple of study sessions and 2 public hearings, and eventually adopted those regulations. In January of 2013, we adopted a follow-up ordinance that pertained to the possession and use of marijuana, and that was more of a law enforcement related ordinance. In April of 2013, in response to the constitutional amendment allowing for retail or recreational, we adopted another temporary moratorium at a council level to get a better handle on how to regulate both medical and recreational applications. And of course, the state was dealing with this at the same time in terms of adopting statutes and their rules. In October of 2013, we adopted our first ordinance pertaining to recreational and retail marijuana facilities, and then the manufacturing of infused products, which is also something that's permitted under the constitutional amendment and under state statutes. About 6 months later, in response to concerns on the potential locations of MIPS, which is again the manufacturing of infused products, we did another temporary 90-day moratorium to give council time to consider whether additional regulations or modifications to the regulations should be considered in regard to manufacturing of infused products. We ultimately, in June, a couple months later, adopted 2 ordinances, one further restricting the permissible location for MIPS in a restricted number of zoning districts, actually just one, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And then further defining and restricting the extent of personal marijuana cultivation that you can have under the Constitution on your own private residence or on your private property. And then flash forward to the most recent action, the fall of this year, we have a pending ordinance that further defines the building code requirements pertaining to both MIPS and to cultivation facilities. Also recently, just a month or so ago in August of 2014, on the 18th, City Council adopted another temporary moratorium in response to concerns as to whether our current regulatory environment was getting it exactly right for the community. So, and it applies to all new marijuana applications, both medical and retail, exclusive of testing facilities. It's effective through November 16th. So in all, we've had 19 public meetings, including the study sessions and the public hearings thus far, and that's the history. Next, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just giving you an overview of what the existing regulatory framework looks like. We do, of course, have state regulations that are fairly significant, heavily involved in the licensing process, also heavily related to the operational aspects. So requirements for video surveillance, for different security systems, for waste disposal of unused product, for tracking of inventory, for labeling. That's all covered at a state level. The city's regulations also deal with some licensing on a more basic level, and then more fundamentally deal with permissible locations, which is what generally the state has given us more jurisdiction to regulate, whether or not we want to allow various marijuana establishments, and if so, where and under what conditions. For the city of Wheat Ridge, the approach that we've taken for medical marijuana and retail or recreational marijuana has been very similar in terms of where they're allowed, so we don't really make many distinctions between whether it's a retail product or a medical product. The permissible locations are generally the same. So what are those permissible locations? For marijuana centers and stores, places where you can buy, just at a retail level, marijuana products or marijuana itself, it's allowed in both the C1 and the IE, C1 being a commercial zone district, IE being industrial employment. C1 is located throughout the city on most of our commercial corridors, or many of them, particularly 44th Avenue, to some extent on Wadsworth Boulevard, the Kipling corridor as well, and some of the cross corridors like 38th Avenue, as well as out in the Youngfield area and up on North Kipling at I-70. So there's quite a bit of C1 zone property in the city. The IE zone property is zoned generally, is located generally north of I-70 in some of our industrial or industrial office areas. So those are the zone districts where you can have retail stores. Another important requirement that we've adopted is a separation requirement. So the logic behind that being we feel like at a policy level we only need a certain number of stores in our community to meet the community's needs. So we've required that they be a 3/4 mile separation between stores, whether they're medical stores or retail stores. They can't be, or combined medical and retail stores, they can't be closer than 3/4 mile from one another. Also, council from the get-go in your first ordinance pertaining to medical marijuana adopted a 1,000-foot minimum separation requirement. That pertains to requiring them to be separated by 1,000 feet from schools, college campuses, daycares, there should be a comma there just for clarity, and drug and alcohol rehab centers. So that's really the regulatory environment for retail stores. Then moving on to MIPS, again, the manufacturing of infused products. Those are only allowed in the IE zone district. The thinking behind that being that it's more of an industrial use, more of a manufacturing process, and that's generally where other types of manufacturing processes are allowed in the city. Most recently, in June of this year, City Council adopted those additional regulations that also require a 1/4 mile separation requirement between those locations. A lesser requirement than the separation requirement between retail stores, but still the intent of that being avoiding to some extent a proliferation of more stores than are needed in the community. And then the same 1,000-foot minimum separation requirements from those other uses that I mentioned before. For cultivation of marijuana product, it's only allowed when attached to or ancillary to a MIP location or a retail store. So you can't have a standalone large cultivation facility unless it's there to support a retail store or a MIP location. Testing facilities, which again are not subject to the current moratorium, those are allowed in IE zone districts just like the MIPS are. And that's really the only restriction we have on those. We feel like that's a fairly use that's fairly consistent with other uses that are permitted in the IE zone district, and that's why, not speaking for council, but why we've taken the approach of just allowing that as a permitted use. Primary caregivers and personal cultivation. Primary caregivers are authorized by the Constitution for up to 6, generally up to 6 patients. We allow those as accessory to a residential use of property. And they're basically treated very similar to how we treat home occupation. So there's limits on the maximum size of 25% of the total gross floor area of the structure, of the main structure of the residence. It can't be conducted outdoors, it has to be conducted indoors. And there can't be any visible evidence. So very similar to what we ask of any other home occupation. We thought there were some similarities between home occupations and this type of activity. So that's really the existing regulatory environment. We've taken a shot at giving some thought to what some additional regulatory options would be. And of course, City Council, when you adopted the moratorium, gave us direction to consider, among other options, the potential for using a special use permit process, which is an existing procedural process under the zoning code for a variety of different uses, of whether that would be appropriate to apply to all marijuana establishments or certain classes of marijuana establishment. So I'll talk initially to that. Special use permits, special uses are defined as discretionary uses in various zoning districts. So every zoning district has a list of things that are permitted, a list of things that are not permitted, and a list of things that fall somewhere in between, I'll say, and are therefore defined as special uses. They may be appropriate on any given parcel of land in that zoning district, but the city has determined that they require a little additional review, hence the special use. And they may or may not be allowed based on, first, a justification by the applicant that there's a need for the facility, and 2, special design and operational considerations that take into the effect any kind of additional impacts that this type of use may have, whether it be traffic or higher utilization of public services or utility services. It could be noise impacts or lighting impacts, some sort of impacts that are greater than a typical permitted use in the zoning district. Just a few examples, there are many, but of existing special uses in commercial districts would be all drive-through uses, so whether it's a bank or a fast food restaurant, if it has a drive-through component, because in large part of the traffic, that has to go through a special use process, as well as car, boat, and trailer sales also in all commercial districts require that special use permit. So what is the process for getting approval of a special use permit? It begins administratively and can be approved administratively under certain conditions, meaning it would go through the Community Development Department, and the Community Development Director would have the authority under certain conditions to administratively approve a special use permit. It does include, as part of that process, 2 public notification procedures and an opportunity for members of the public to submit written objections. If written objections are received, that automatically triggers a City Council review and action on the matter on the special use permit, and that would be conducted after holding a public hearing, much like we did earlier today on the subdivision application. If no written objections are received and the Community Development Director determines that the special use criteria have been met, then administrative approval is possible. In terms of what those review criteria are, I didn't list them all in this presentation, but I did include them in the contents of the council packet. But there are 8 specific criteria that try to address the types of impacts that we're trying to mitigate through this review process. And they're fairly broad. Some are fairly specific, and some are more general. But it's community impacts, it's compatibility in terms of adjacent land uses, it's the potential for the use to create blight, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the criteria relate back to impact on the streets and traffic impacts. So that was the one option that council asked us to take a look at, and we can speak to that more if there are questions. But we took a shot at a few more additional regulatory options that council could take. Additional separation requirements was one option. Some of the issues that we've heard come up in some of the recent meetings with the public have related to proximity of some of these marijuana establishments to schools, to parks, to residential areas. Obviously, we already have the 1,000-foot separation requirement from schools and daycares. We don't have separation requirements from parks and from residential areas. There was actually some consideration given during previous adoption of ordinances on this matter. And I think the feeling was, at the time at least, that given just kind of the makeup of the city in terms of the proximity of residential and commercial land uses to each other, that separation requirements from residential uses and also potentially from parks, just because we have a lot of those as well, thankfully, could be difficult in terms of effectively excluding marijuana uses. Now, from a policy perspective, that could certainly still be a choice, but that's why when we previously looked at that and said if we created a buffer requirement from parks and or residential areas, that would effectively zone out marijuana establishments, whether you agree with that or not. That was the practical impact. If we want to go down that road of providing additional separation from additional uses, we'd want to look at some distances. Perhaps it's a lesser distance than the 1,000 feet that we use for schools and daycares. And we'd want to prepare some maps, as we have for you in the past, so you would understand the impacts of those separation requirements out there in the real world. There's also been some discussion, at least anecdotally, about potentially limitations on the size of marijuana establishments, that perhaps at some point the scale of a marijuana establishment could be such that it's no longer in keeping with the scale of the community and the needs of the community in terms of allowing for these types of uses within our city limits, and that would certainly be appropriate. We've done a similar thing in our mixed-use neighborhood zone districts in terms of placing maximum sizes on certain types of retail uses to keep them in scale with the intent of that zoning district. So that's certainly something that we could consider and make a proposal if that's the direction council wishes to go. Another area where we're currently looking at building code modifications is really relative to the public safety aspects of some of the cultivation facilities as well as the manufacturing processes. And we've had discussion with council at a study session level about different options and gotten feedback from you on that direction. So we are moving forward with adoption of the current versions of the international codes. And as part of that process, we will be proposing local amendments that place additional appropriate levels of restrictions on cultivation and manufacturing operations. Additionally, we are working on, or we have drafted regulations that would impose greater mechanical requirements on cultivation and manufacturing facilities, with the intent of that being that some of the concerns that we've heard out in the community pertain to the odor and it being more of an in-your-face kind of presence if the odor is stronger. And we think there are ways to impose additional mechanical requirements that filter out, at least to some extent, I'm not sure it'll be 100%, some of that odor outside of the building. We haven't at this point in the current draft of the ICC, which is scheduled to be heard at a public hearing, I believe, on October 13th. We haven't made those requirements retroactive. We could, if that's the direction of council, make those retroactive for some period of time. In other words, the mechanical requirements pertaining to the odor could be effective on all existing uses within some reasonable period of time, like 6 months or 12 months. We'd have to discuss that further. There is an option that's in that the state has preserved for local jurisdictions to place an outright ban on marijuana establishments or certain classes of marijuana establishments, either by adopting an ordinance by City Council or by City Council referring a ballot question to the voters. So that's certainly an option that can still be considered. We have not done that to date. Certainly other communities in the state and the Front Range have taken that approach. If this occurs, obviously we would have a number, 6 of existing facilities in the city that would need to be handled in some way in terms of whether we would make those future established, what we would determine to be the status of those existing establishments, whether they would just become legally non-conforming and be allowed to be maintained in perpetuity under certain conditions, or whether we would require them to actually be required to cease operations if a ban was approved in the community. So lastly, I want to close, and then I'll hand it over to Chief Brennan with just kind of the next steps, and we can come back to this later if you need to reference this. But the temporary moratorium expires on November 16th. After that, we will go back to the existing regulatory environment unless one of 2 things happens. One would be an extension of the moratorium, and that would have to occur by consideration of council as a regular ordinance. Emergency ordinance was the approach taken on the initial temporary moratorium, and you can't extend a moratorium with another emergency ordinance. You'd have to do that through a regular 2-reading ordinance process. The other option would be to obviously adopt additional regulations, and that's what we're kind of here to get direction from you tonight. We have targeted a couple additional study sessions, either the 13th of October as a special study session, or the 20th of October is the next available regular study session that we could discuss this with council. In terms of the logistics of actually adopting new regulations or modified regulations, we have looked at the schedule for future council meetings and have identified that October 27th would be open for a first reading, and that would allow for a public hearing on November 10th within the time frame of the expiration of the moratorium on the 16th. I would note that most of the regulations that we've adopted to date pertaining to marijuana have involved modifications to the zoning code, chapter 26. Any modification to the zoning code requires consideration by the Planning Commission, who forwards their recommendation on that ordinance to City Council for consideration. Working on that same schedule of October 27th and November 10th, we did identify 2 dates where a Planning Commission consideration could be given of a draft ordinance, and those would be October 16th and November 6th. So those are, perhaps challenging dates to meet, but we wanted to outline that it is certainly possible to get something done before that moratorium expires, and we look forward to getting additional direction from you this evening. And that's the end of my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Dan, unless there are any initial questions.
Are there questions from the council? Oh, none at this time? Mr. Brennan?
So council, what I've put together for you are really 2 slide presentations that my crime analyst put together. One deals with calls for service at marijuana facilities, and the other speaks to what we're seeing in terms of drugs and alcohol in our schools. So I've cut down what she's done to make the presentation shorter, but I'm certainly available to answer any questions that you all might have. So in terms of calls for service, so these are any calls for service that we might receive at a marijuana facility. So MIPS, recreational or medicinal marijuana. We have 6 that are currently in here. And the chart at the bottom of the slide shows, horizontally it shows the years, so beginning in 2009 through 2014. And the vertical a scale shows the total number of calls for service. So each of these lines represents one of the 6 facilities that we have currently operating. So what the slide really gives you a picture of is in 2009, we had a medicinal marijuana a facility, the Ridge, Sea Kindness, that began operation in 2009. And you can see that the calls for service there were relatively static in terms of how they cycled, but a start of an increase beginning in 2013. All of the other sites that you'll see when they began to, when they opened, you'll see an increase in total calls for service. So those calls for service could be alarms, they could be crimes that occurred there, they could be suspicious incidents, vehicles, persons, they could be a variety of different things that the police department may have received a call for service on. So the second slide here really shows you 3 specific things. At the top left, it shows total calls for service. So it lists those out by year, and it shows the types of calls for service that we have. So the biggest number of calls for service that we've had at any of our facilities have been on alarms, silent alarms, when a motion detector or a perimeter alarm is activated. And we went from 1 in 2009 to 60 thus far in 2014. The other notable areas up here are burglaries. We've had 5 to date. We've had 3 disturbances involving dispensaries to date, and 1 juvenile trouble, and then 13 calls for services pertains to suspicious incidents, vehicles, or persons. You'll see in the lower center of the slide that 70% of all the calls for service thus far to marijuana facilities have been alarms. And then on the right side of that slide, it shows you that 2 of these facilities have generated close to 70% of the total calls for service, Medical Marijuana Supply and Best Colorado Meds. And again, the largest percentage of those calls for service, again, have been alarm types of calls. This slide represents the major calls for service at dispensaries that we've had. So beginning in 2013, the juvenile trouble call was at Options Medical Center, and that involved juveniles who were reportedly outside asking people to go inside and buy marijuana for them. That is something typically that we encounter with liquor stores, with juveniles who are trying to obtain, beer or alcohol. There have been 5 burglaries. 4 of those have been actual burglaries where different facilities have been broken into. The Medical Marijuana Supply, Best Colorado Meds, and Chronic Therapy have all had burglaries. 2 at Best Colorado Meds, 2 at the Medical Marijuana Supply, 1 attempted burglary at Chronic Therapy there at 27th and Kipling, and 2 reports of thefts that have been taken with a brief description. 1 involved a backpack that was stolen, and another one had a t-shirt, a business had a t-shirt taken from one of their facilities. So other calls for service that were associated with dispensaries involved 2 aggravated robberies. 1 occurred in 2010, the other in 2014. Both of them involved Sea Kindness, now known as the Ridge. And these essentially same MO in each of these cases. A customer went in, purchased an ounce or less of marijuana, and once they left the facility, somebody was there to rob them at gunpoint. So in one case, there was a person who was leaving with a duffel bag of medical marijuana and was confronted by somebody with a semi-auto. The second one, the most recent one, a subject was followed by a minivan and then robbed at gunpoint as well, and marijuana taken from them. So the other thing that we sort of look at, too, as it pertains to marijuana are driving behaviors. So the chart in the center of this particular slide gives you an idea as it pertains to DUI arrests by year on the left, and then marijuana DUID, driving under the influence of drug arrests, in the center column, and then the percentage of that total that is marijuana related. So you can see on average, over the last couple of years, we've averaged about 150 to 200 DUI arrests, and out of those, somewhere in the vicinity of about 4%, if you round it up just a little bit, have been DUID arrests. We anticipate to see a continuing rise in this trend, particularly based on where the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration is reporting now in regards to fatal and serious bodily injuries nationwide and in Colorado. Although fatalities have decreased in Colorado, the number of incidents involving people under the influence of marijuana has increased. So this is an area of focus for us, and an area that we're looking at increasing training. Certainly the indicators for people who are driving under the influence of drugs are different than DUIs, but we are seeing a trend upward. It's not significant at this point, but it is an increasing trend, one that we'll keep an eye on. So, the bottom line in terms of calls for service, I've broken them down into three. I have one other anecdotal thing that I'll share with you in regards to that is, the majority of calls for service we're getting right now at marijuana facilities are alarm calls for service. 98% of those alarm calls for service have ended up without an incident, with the exception of the 5 burglaries that I've mentioned. I also touch on the burglaries that we've seen. The state and the medical marijuana, or the medical enforcement division of the state, require some extensive security systems in these facilities, so it's not unusual that you would see a lot of calls for service related to alarms, because they're required by state legislation to have some pretty extensive security systems in there. The aggravated robberies as it pertains to these businesses is a concern, but then again, we've only seen 2, and we don't have figures on the number of transactions that these facilities have, but it is an area we'll keep an eye on. It's a concern. We certainly don't want to see somebody hurt over or killed over marijuana, but we've only had 2 to date during this particular time frame. The other piece that we're seeing, and I didn't have the statistics to bring, is the West Metro Drug Task Force, which we participate in, is probably going out on an average of about 6 calls for service per month as it pertains to the regulation of marijuana grows, whether they're business related, so medical marijuana related, or home occupation grows. And on occasion, our officers are called out. We just were called out on an outside grow, which council has prohibited both for medicinal and recreational marijuana. So there's still a lot of education that needs to go out over what is a legal grow and what is not a grow. And we have not had an opportunity in Wheat Ridge, all the surrounding communities have, had the opportunity to see any issues with people attempting to make hashish oil and a subsequent explosion. And a lot of we prohibit that by ordinance as well. And the big community to the east of us is also going through a process to look at prohibiting that, as well. So I think from the perspective of trying to limit the size of home grows, outdoor grows, and hash oils, we have taken the steps that we need to take that, and have not yet seen any increases in calls for service regarding that. So let me touch just quickly on juveniles and drugs, and I cut this slide down. We did 2 things, schools and the community. I've cut it down just to schools, sort of to give council an overview of what this looks like. And this is just our calls for service at schools. The schools also have an administrative way of dealing with this, and our SROs or patrol officers may not always be involved in other school-related kinds of things. So the historical data shows that since the 2010-2011 school year in the city of Wheat Ridge, we've had 255 juvenile alcohol or drug-related arrests that have been made in our school. The statistics show that the majority of those arrests have been for marijuana or drug paraphernalia, 93%, 53% for marijuana, 40% for paraphernalia. And only 5% of the incidents that we've been called in to deal with have dealt with alcohol. And it shouldn't surprise you that 54% of those offenses in that particular year occurred at Wheat Ridge High School, and the majority of the remaining one of those occurred, in our middle schools. 32%, however, occurred at Everett School, and then 69% of those offenses, interestingly enough, occur in the second semester of the year, not the front. And that's important to remember because I'm going to give you some interesting statistics for this year. So after the 2010-2011 school year, in the following school years, the number of arrests dropped. In 2012 to 2013, it dropped by 19%, with only 67 total arrests. And then in the 13-14 school year, we only had 54 total arrests, 51 for marijuana drug paraphernalia, and 3 for alcohol-related arrests. 4 of those cases, however, involved more serious cases of distribution and selling of marijuana in the school. That wasn't something that we had seen before in those schools. And the number of arrests doubled as well for 12 to 13-year-olds compared to a decrease in 16 to 17-year-olds, where we saw a decrease by about a third. The other interesting thing that occurred, and troubling piece that occurred, is in the 2013-14 school year, we had 4 students, 3 at Pennington and 1 at Stevens Elementary, that were arrested for bringing marijuana edibles to school. And that was the first time we had seen that in Wheat Ridge as well. And here's the other interesting trend. You remember that I told you, what we've generally seen is more marijuana, alcohol-related activity in the second semester of the school year. Well, as of September 14th, 2014, we've had 15 students who've been arrested for drug-related offenses in Wheat Ridge schools so far. And the statistics are up there, 13 at Wheat Ridge High School and 2 at Wheat Ridge 5 through 8. So that's certainly a trend. I'm not prepared to give you a prediction on what that trend means, other than it looks different than what we've seen in the past. And I think it's one, as a community, we should follow from a prevention and education perspective. And then in the 2013-2014 school year, we had a little bit of an increase from 2012 to 2013, and then the chart goes out to note that Wheat Ridge 5 through 8 saw the biggest increase in the last school year in drug offenses, according to our statistics, and Wheat Ridge High School did see a decrease last year in terms of their statistics. So that's where we sit with our schools. So here, as the chief law enforcement officer for the city, here are my takeaways. As a PD, we're seeing an upward trend in calls for service at marijuana facilities. A lot of those are what I would call non-crime related calls for service at this point, but it's something that we need to continue to track. We're just really scratching the surface in regards to what the legalization of marijuana means in our states and our community, and there are numbers that we'll need to look at in different ways of data gathering that we'll need to consider as we move forward. I've touched on the alarm calls for service that we'll need to see. That we see right now, but the interesting thing is I asked my crime analyst to do a comparison of similar kinds of businesses, liquor stores and convenience stores, and what we're seeing from an alarm call perspective is that the alarm calls at marijuana facilities is within the bell curve norm of what we're seeing at liquor stores and convenience stores. So we're not seeing any outliers out there that would show that we're seeing really significant increases that would be worrisome, but we are seeing an upward trend, and it's something we need to continue to track and look at. And then we're seeing an increase in marijuana-related arrests in our middle schools and elementary schools. That's troubling. I've told council before that we really need to look at prevention and education pieces, but we can't do that without the school board being in alignment with us in regards to that. But as a police chief, as a father, as somebody that's been in this business a long, long time, I think prevention and education is probably the best positive step that any school, district, or community can take. And Again, just in closing, further studies needed to determine both the positive and negative consequences of marijuana legalization in Wheat Ridge. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Does council have any questions of the chief?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. DiTullio?
Thanks. Chief, could you clarify for the audience on the primary caregivers and the home occupations, that those are regulated by the state and that the city doesn't have much to do with those as far as banning them or not allowing them? That's the state regulated in the Constitution. Could you clarify that?
I can try. So you have two pieces of legislation. Amendment 20 deals with the medical marijuana piece. Amendment 64 deals with the recreational marijuana piece. So Amendment 20 limits the number of plants that a person can grow as it pertains to being either a primary caregiver or a patient who has a card. What the city has chosen to do is a piece of that is to try to limit the home occupation or the amount of square footage that a caregiver or somebody who has a medical marijuana card can use in their residence to grow marijuana. And it looks a little bit different for primary caregivers. That landscape is changing again as the Colorado Department of Public Health revisits the whole issue of how many plants a primary caregiver and how many patients a primary caregiver can give. But the state regulates that piece, and then cities regulates the home occupation piece. On the recreational side of things, people can possess less than 1 ounce of marijuana edibles, hash oil, oils, butters, those kinds of things. And it also allows individuals to have plants as well. The city has chosen to adopt an ordinance that sort of limits the home occupancy of the amount of square footage that plants can be grown in. I believe that is 25% of the total square footage of a residence. So there's part of this that's regulated by the Constitution, state legislation, and then by the city as well. The other interesting piece is the Medical Enforcement Division has been given the regulatory authority to deal with, to set regulations around medicinal and recreational marijuana. Those are administrative regulations. The city right now currently, proposal to council, we haven't brought it forward yet, is for the city to look at adopting those regulatory codes, because only the Medical Enforcement Division of the state has authorization to regulate those codes. We as a police department do not. We can regulate the current ordinances. So part of the plan is to bring forward to council as part of this a proposal to look at those regulatory codes, and Ms. Barry from the city attorney's office and I will be meeting in the coming weeks to discuss that. Does that help with your question? Thank you.
Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, it concerns me greatly, especially being the father of an elementary age child, that there is an increase in marijuana in the elementary schools and middle schools. My question is related to other surrounding municipalities and any increase or decrease in those schools as well as compared to Wheat Ridge, whether we stand out as an outlier in that increase or whether we are in line with what's happening in other schools and other jurisdictions, and how does that compare? And maybe that's something we can look to as we bring this issue forward, if we can find any sort of metrics that show where we stand with other municipalities, or whether this is something unique to us. And if it is unique to us, I'd like to try to figure out a way to resolve that as quickly as possible, because that's very concerning.
Well, I don't think we're an outlier. I can tell you anecdotally that in discussions with other Metro chiefs, the issues that we see in Wheat Ridge are the same issues that they're seeing in their schools. There are some school districts that are having more of an issue with marijuana in their schools than we're seeing, perhaps. But we are trying to work with the school principals and the area superintendent, to get a handle on, what's this landscape look like, and start to gather the data so we can start making some of the decisions that we need to make down the road.
And as a follow-up to that, I'd like to see exactly when you mentioned there's an administrative process that some schools may use relative to particular instances. I'd like to understand better if the use of that administrative process has changed over time, or whether they've always brought in the resource officer immediately, or if there's been any change to those types of policies.
And I think that that's probably something that could be best answered by somebody from the school district in regards to how they handle those. So council knows we meet on an annual basis with all of the school principals in Wheat Ridge. And although they work for a broader district, we meet with them on a regular basis to sort of standardize how we do business. But the school district, that school administrator, does have the ability to handle certain things within the school code of conduct. And that may or may not be outside the scope of what may be going on from a criminal perspective. So there are two pieces of data sets I think we need to try to gather. One is what the police are mandated to report, what we get involved in, what our school resource officers get involved in, and then incidents that the school is seeing as well. And that's something, I think that's a reasonable ask of our school district.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Wooden?
So the data you just presented to us was specifically for the businesses and the schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in general, in Wheat Ridge, regarding maybe the black market or something, or just general arrests, do we have any data on how marijuana might have impacted our city statistics, separately from the ones you just presented?
Well, what I have not presented to you is the data from the West Metro Drug Task Force. That is a task force that we have 2 detectives assigned to that looks at the larger scope of drugs, and so they're looking at not only marijuana but cocaine and ecstasy and heroin. Heroin right now is tending to be a drug that we're seeing an upward tick in, but we deal with all aspects of that. And I could certainly look at bringing a presentation as it pertains to maybe the broader scope of drugs in the Jefferson County area that the Drug Task Force works on.
Mr. DiTullio.
Well, I could answer Mr. Urban's question a little bit. I'm a special education teacher on the department chair at Wheat Ridge High School. And since we've had, and I deal with a lot of students every day, at least 150 students that we were teaching or dealing with in our department. And if and when a student is caught with alcohol or drugs, and this has been going on since I've been there, the SRO is always involved because they're the ones that have to usually search a locker or search a student. Administrator or a teacher is not going to go search a student or a locker. It's going to be this SRO because they have the legal authority to do that with witnesses. So it comes back down to, at Wheat Ridge High School, we have parents who support the use of these products, and their students support the use of this product. So whether it's banned or not in Wheat Ridge, parents are using it, and it really comes down to you as a parent telling your kids what's good and what's bad and doing the best for your student. I have 2 students. They went through public schools and private schools, and drugs and alcohol and rock and roll and everything else was still there the day after marijuana passed and before marijuana passed, because when you're 16 or 17, when you're told no, it makes it more desirable. So it's going to be up to the parents to make this work as long as you have your kids in public schools or private schools and you're dealing with it. It's not going to be the city telling them no, because usually when the city tells them no, they thumb their nose at the city or any authority. That's just the way teenagers are. And if you remember back when you were 16 or 17 and you talked about alcohol or whatever, that's where we're at. So,
Any other questions of the chief? No? All right. Do we have any more presentations from staff?
Madam Mayor, I think there was a concern that this presentation by the staff was timed. This wasn't timed. It's the pro and the con that are timed.
Right, exactly. We will move to, there's 2 things we're going to have to do, which of course, let me read this to you. First of all, the September 22nd meeting is a study session of the City Council, not a public hearing. The citizen comment period will be limited to 20 minutes total. 10 minutes for those in favor of marijuana sales and 10 minutes for those against. This is to ensure that the council will have sufficient time to discuss the issue. Any formal changes to the city's marijuana ordinance will be scheduled at a later date, and public comment will be welcomed. So we've had a review of what regulations we have in place, as well as what could be in place, as well as a review from the police chief as to service calls within the business community as well as arrests in our student population. I would like to open the floor now for public discussion. Remember, it's 10 minutes and 10 minutes total for each side. And as the coin cost came out, it was those who are for will first speak. Do I have somebody here speaking for? And we do. Is it one person?
No.
There will be how many of you?
We need a line.
Yeah.
Those who are speaking with me, can you please come forward?
Please come forward.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to ask all the folks that are going to be speaking, have you all signed your name on a list so that we can get the spelling correct? Okay, thank you.
Now, you are limited to 10 minutes for all of you.
Yes.
Okay? All right, we're starting the timing now.
My name is Sandy Bedore. I am one of the owners of Chronic Therapy at 10030 West 27th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. I'm here to say I love my job. I am a proud person who loves to trailblaze and be a pioneer in a new industry. Entrepreneurs such as myself usually can only dream of such an opportunity that I get to live today. I am proud that we are job creators and have created 23 living wage jobs in less than a year in the city of Wheat Ridge. I am proud that we work in a highly regulated environment and that we go above and beyond what is required so as to provide a safe and secure place for our employees to work and our customers to come to. I love that we are helping hundreds of people each and every day with their pain management and with citizens 21 years and older a means of legally purchasing marijuana in a safe environment. I love that my son can now manage his seizures with no side effects. I love to work with my adult children and that we are a family-run business. Actually, we have 2 families that own and operate Chronic Therapy. I love that we chose Wheat Ridge and that Wheat Ridge chose us. I love working with the staff at City Hall, and I love working with those of you on City Council who have brought your concerns to us. I know that you know we are doing good work. I love challenges and figuring out solutions. I love that our employee Jason can buy a new car, his very first, imagine, and that Crystal can now support her son, and that Bob can start a family and buy a house, and that Jeff has moved across the country just to be here with his bachelor's of horticulture and to make his home here in Colorado. I love that we are responsible, tax-paying citizens with the guts and fortitude to stick with it, to beat the odds, to succeed with business and with life. I love each and every day I wake up and that I go to work because to me this is not work. There is so much love and happiness every day. We see and witness miracles on a daily basis. It is simply a privilege to work with my family and my friends, and it is amazing to work with all the people who have found their way to our door. It is one of the most profound experiences of my life. Thank you for being part of our incredible journey. And now I would like to put into the record, I think this is how I'm supposed to do it, petitions that people have signed.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and bring the next speaker up because we're running out of time.
I'm sorry, what?
And
Yeah.
we will look at those, yes.
How are y'all doing? I just wanted to say I'm a retired soldier.
Could I have your name, sir?
I'm Aaron Walker. I'm a retired Marine. I was wounded in action twice on 2 separate occasions and received an honorable discharge. I also received some permanent pain and PTSD. I was prescribed opiate pain medication and Valium for years, and it all but destroyed my life. And when I was recovering from that, I discovered that marijuana made my PTSD bearable and my physical pain bearable. And I'm just here to speak on behalf of marijuana legalization and the safety of its use and the practicality of its use. That's all. Just thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Your name?
Hi, my name is Adam Foster, and I'm with Sandy at Chronic Therapy. I'll be very brief because I already sent a letter to the City Council and Mr. Dahl talking about CRS 38-1-101. That is a state statute that says that once a legal use is established of property, that the government cannot just eliminate that use. So although the City Council could have banned outright medical marijuana businesses or recreational, when the constitutional amendments were passed, they cannot now eliminate a pre-existing lawful use. Why is that? Because here, the businesses have paid their fees, they've spent tremendous amounts of money to build out their locations, and in many instances, it's owned by small business owners who have put their entire livelihood and their whole life savings into these businesses. Pardon me. And the government cannot just change the rules to wipe out someone's entire investment and to wipe out their life savings in one stroke. Now, with regard to regulations on new businesses, there's substantially more leeway, but for the existing businesses, it would be unnecessary and unfair to eliminate licensed businesses that are playing by the rules.
Thank you. Next person, please. Name?
My name is TJ Christensen with TJ Christensen Heating and Cooling. I'm showing up today to show my solidarity with another local business owner. They are proud to have brought 23 jobs to their establishment, but they definitely bring other jobs to the community. These guys, they pull permits, they pay good, and they do everything per code. So we have great building standards when businesses like these guys are in business. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nick Dice.
Last
I'm a
name
shop owner
again?
here in the city of Wheat Ridge.
Dice is your last name?
Yeah, D-I-C-E.
Thank you.
I'll try to go fast here. I've been a proud shop owner in this city for a little over 2 years. I've built relationships with the citizens of Wheat Ridge. Some people are great and accepting and welcoming and understanding of our industry and the things that we are trying to do, and realizing that we are probably the most scrutinized industry, means that we're also the most willing to reach out in any way, shape, or form to the community and try and handle issues before they arise or as they arise. As an industry, we do care about the community our businesses reside in. Speaking for myself and some of the other store owners, I would love to see a way for communication between community, industry, and city government that wouldn't involve either a city council meeting for every issue that arises or some sort of internal way to handle it as they do come up. As new of an industry as it is, a learning process for community, industry, and government as recreational goes into effect, I would hope consideration would be given to the stores that have been operating with compliance, with loyalty to all city and state laws, whether it be grandfathering or some other form of protection for the existing shops operating in this city for some years now. And in regards to as the chief mentioned earlier, the extensive alarm calls and things like that, the state has required so many new systems and requirements with these alarms, heat sensors, things like that, to where the tech just basically hasn't caught up with that end of it. A light kicks on, it kicks on a thermal sensor, and the security companies just haven't planned for that. And we are trying we're trying really hard to come up with and deal with
You're
these
down to
issues as they
2
arise.
minutes for the whole group.
All right. Well, again, thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John DeLue, and I'm the National Sales Director for Blue Line Protection Group, and I'm also a retired Deputy Sheriff from Jefferson County, 27 years. Blue Line is a company that was created by and run by former law enforcement and military. We provide secure transportation, armed personnel, and regulatory compliance to these dispensaries, some of these dispensaries in Wheat Ridge. By doing so, we help establish and maintain a lawful and transparent industry and minimize the black market operations dealing in marijuana products where the product is unregulated, untested, and untraceable. Our clients are responsible business owners and remain compliant with local, state, and federal laws. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Chris Hartman. I own a local small electrical company. In the last 5 years that I've been privileged enough to call the fine people at Crown Therapy customers, it's also been my privilege to come to call them friends. I'm a father of 4 myself, and these are absolutely the kind of people that I would want moving into my neighborhood. Not only have they helped my business, they do everything to the T, and I would like to go back to what Mr. DiTillo said, that marijuana has been around before these regulations. It's going to be around after these regulations. It comes down to parenting and personal decisions, not running responsible business owners out. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. We got about 20 seconds. Go ahead.
My name is Cassandra. I'm the manager of Nick Dice's store, Medical Marijuana, or Medical MJ Supply. And I am a 7-year cancer survivor that has found a home in this industry. I am very proud that I have been privy to regulations and learning as the industry has grown. But your neighbors, your coworkers, people you see and interact with every day come into our stores. And I hope that you can see them as the people that they are and respect them. And just like you'd like to buy a bottle of wine at
you're out of time.
They like to reserve that privilege.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had to call you. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to do the other group. Thank you very much. It was very informative. We're going to do the other group, and then we will take a break, a small break. The council is needing a little break. I didn't get her name. I'm sorry. Genevieve, Janelle, did you get the name of the last speaker? No. Cassandra? Could we get the name of the last speaker? I want to make sure we've got that recorded.
Cassandra, what's your last name?
Did you get that? Okay. Thank you.
All right, ready? Go.
All right, we're ready to go. Hi.
All right, Madam Mayor, City Council, Carol Salzman, Vice President and Executive Director for the Lutheran Medical Center Foundation, and a Wheat Ridge citizen, 10285 West 33rd Avenue. On behalf of the council, I wanted to let you know that Lutheran has been a proud supporter of preventative care and health and wellness in our community for over 100 years. We are the premier provider of mental health and substance abuse in our community through our West Pine Psychiatric Center and Recovery Center. Of concern for us are several things. One of them, some of the data points that Chief Brennan shared, I'm appreciative of. We also do data on the types of cases we see through our emergency room. We have the largest emergency department in the Jefferson County area. We see about 75,000 visits a year. But of those, the ones that are concerning to us are the children. So we're talking about children 22 months up through their teens who are coming to our facility because of substances in their bodies that include marijuana, heroin, cocaine, alcohol. This is serious, over 80 kids annually. I'm not bringing you tonight the statistics on adults, but I will provide that in a follow-up letter to you so you're aware of the number of cases that we see related to substance abuse. It's a great concern. We're supporters of the Task Force for Drug and are involved in that process also. I think that's very critical. As a citizen, I am highly concerned. Concerned because we have kids that are walking by facilities. You know, this is our choice. We trust you as leaders to look at all the data, to be respectful of the things that you hear, and to know that we are setting the precedents for our community. Neighbors around us have chosen to have stronger laws, and so I challenge you to listen to what others are doing and strongly consider that for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Ron Castagna. I am not a Wheat Ridge citizen, but I am a former principal for 17 years at Lakewood High School. I know it's unusual for anybody from Lakewood to be here in Wheat Ridge, but you'll have to put up with that just for a few minutes. Point of clarification. Actually, administrators search lockers because we have less burden of proof on searching those lockers than a police officer does. And administrators are the ones, or somebody assigned to it, that does the searches, again, because we don't have to have, we can have just a reasonable reason to search those, and we're the owners of the lockers, so that gives us the right to go in those lockers. So I just wanted to clarify that point. So I've got a product here. This product was made and produced without regulatory oversight for health, safety, and efficiency, and there may be health risks associated with this, with the consumption of this. Looks just like candy at the Italian festival in Belmar or anywhere else. You folks have a responsibility. I have only watched lives ruined for high school kids through my 17 years at Lakewood, 4 out in Elizabeth, 12 at Overland, 2 in New Jersey. And I can't think of anybody that wants their kids hooked on this. And we have a responsibility as adults to send a message that is better than what we've done so far. The tide is turning, the votes are turning. The people in Colorado thought, we're just going to decriminalize this. We've made our kids criminals. We've decriminalized it for adults who are making profit, who have even lied to their own customers. Go down to Broadway and find the gel that they say will give you a therapy massage, and you won't find any THC in it because they're so irresponsible, they're not even living it up to it. And as far as your taxes go, it's a cash business. It's a cash business for a reason. Who's going to pay the taxes that come from this? Who's going to count every plant, every leaf, all the stuff that comes from this? I want to see that accounting process and see what cost that takes to the taxpayers, and then what's left. And I will tell you, as an educator, I don't want drug money. It isn't worth it. I've watched kids die over this sort of stuff.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been very respectful, and I would really like you to carry on with that kind of respect so that our council can hear everything. Thank you.
Council, my name is Roger Morin. I lived in District 3 for 10 years and have 4 children under 18. When my 11-year-old heard rumor of a marijuana store at 38th and Miller Street, about 200 yards from our house, she asked me if we'd be safe. I told her I didn't know, and so wrote Councilman Pond and Fitzgerald for what the state knew about crime and marijuana shops. Councilman Fitzgerald responded, "These issues are all new to every public official in Colorado, and we have nothing to go on." Council, my daughter got me thinking of the reasonable hazards around a store that sells a potent, addictive, psychotropic drug that, in part, packaged in candy and soda forms. The public safety hazards I think of are vandalism, drug abuse in public, possibly theft, also increased vehicle and pedestrian accidents, and the inadvertent consumption of edibles. I see 2 other subtle, persistent psychological hazards to kids. One is increased anxiety. Kids have enough on their plate without adding a pot shop where they must live, walk, and play. The second is formation in children's heads of a positive attitude about the social use of marijuana. Advertising, including storefront signs where kids must live, walk past, and play, affects a child's thoughts. That's simply wrong. Council, in addition to a permanent moratorium, I make 2 requests. First, that you publish the rationale, the risks, for why you placed a 1,000-foot buffer around schools, daycares, and treatment centers. Second, that you go on the record for how you see the benefits of marijuana establishments versus the risks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. You have 3 minutes left.
My name is Jennifer Yates. I live at 3700 Miller Street. It's clear from tonight's turnout that marijuana is a big deal, and it's not without its many associated harms, especially to our youth. Even if you take away the balloons, flags, flippers, and smells, supporting the marijuana industry still sends a message to our youth that use is acceptable and encouraged behavior. It has been said that parents should be responsible for their children's own actions, but as a community, we have an obligation to help our youth meet their full potential. We need to support and protect them by working to reduce social harms whenever possible.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Shepard, and I live at 7 Twilight Drive. And we all care about our community, we do. We ask council to work with our schools, support our kids, help our community by passing a permanent moratorium on all new marijuana businesses and expansion of existing facilities. And I'd like to ask, we were really concerned about time, and we had so many people who wanted to speak tonight. So I'd just like to say, all in favor of a permanent moratorium in Wheat Ridge on new businesses, please raise your hand. Thank you so much, council. We're grateful for your time, and we're grateful for the discussion.
Thank you.
I'm Ronna Burrows. I live at 3565 Miller Street. I half a
couldn't
block
hear the
away
name. Could the
in the
clerk hear?
corner. Ronna Burrows. Okay.
You got it? Okay, good.
In the last 2 years, the gas station that was there, the police nighttime responses have been at least 4, and that's a gas station, not maybe it's alarms, maybe it's burglary, I don't know, but that was nighttime. That doesn't include shoplifting or gas and dash. So if they already are crooks coming to the gas station, you can bet they'll be there at the corner for marijuana. The opportunity theft is huge. I came from Denver, where we had a lot of opportunity theft, and that's getting the bikes out of the driveway, looking in the backyards. If you have people who are on the bus lines who are coming in the daytime for this kind of thing, they must not have a job. And gee, they just spend all their rent money on dope. And being dopes themselves, they go ahead and peruse the neighborhoods to see if they can find easy thefts. And I know that as anecdotal as opposed to statistics. Another thing, Mr. DiTullio, is that if you have lack of access to dope, that's a deterrent. Easy access is not a deterrent.
You have 40 seconds.
There's already several stores on
20
44th.
seconds.
There's one on 27th and Kipling. That's ease of access for anybody who really needs it or wants it. And we don't need one right there on 38th and Miller, where kids walk by the school to go to Everett, walk by the school to go to Prospect Valley. It's too bad it's by Pennington, but we don't need it in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. That's 10 minutes. I'm sorry. That felt like a very abrupt thing, but this is still a study session, and there will be opportunity down the road when we get to some regulations, okay? Now, we're going to have a slight break if the council needs that, and then we were going to have the 2 presentations.
I think it's sad that you think people who ride buses don't have jobs.
Okay, let's take a slight break, and then we'll be returning in 5 minutes.
George.
there's any hats out there. We are now going to have our two presentations, which will also be timed. They will be timed also, and we're going to reverse the order because of the coin toss. So we will start with Mr. Bob Doyle, who is the Colorado Smart Approach to Marijuana. Was that the name?
Correct. The chair.
He is the chairman of that group.
Correct.
And if we're settled down, Mr. Doyle will, let's give a few minutes. Please, everybody come in the room because this presentation is timed, and we'd like to have everybody else have a chance to see it. All right, let's start.
You ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me just start my watch here so I can keep my watch. Well, thank you. I am the chair of Colorado SAM. We're Smart Approaches to Marijuana. It's we're the Colorado affiliate of Project SAM. This is a new national movement and coalition that began about 18 months ago. We now have affiliates in 27 states that works on a public health and science-based approach to marijuana that does not include commercialization or legalization. I've worked in tobacco prevention for 20 years, and that's really what brought me to the issue of marijuana. More so from just a public health standpoint, but I was seeing and hearing some of the same messaging and strategies the tobacco industry has used over the last 40 years. One of the messages that we hear often is, the key messages tobacco gave us for so long was it's not addictive, it's not harmful, we don't want kids to use it, and the use of our drug is about freedom. When in fact, actually, the irony is that drug use is about addiction, and that's how they make their profits. And this is a quote from the executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance, one of the large funders of Amendment 64, comparing this movement to women's right to vote and abolishing slavery. And below you see a freedom billboard that Philip Morris is currently running in parts of Africa and Asia. And many people ask me, when's the tobacco industry, or would the tobacco industry get into the legalized marijuana business? And yes, they would. Why wouldn't they? And this is one from the secret documents of the 1970s during the Carter administration. They, in essence, said, we're ready. We've got the fields to grow it and the machines to roll it. And part of our work here is, people say commercialized marijuana makes us safer. And my response is, are we going to be safer when Philip Morris has marijuana? This is really important. The Surgeon General's report is 50 years old. The Surgeon General said that cigarettes are actually deadlier today than they were 50 years ago. And part of it was this graph illustrates how the tobacco companies made their product more addictive and more appealing to children. They altered the levels of menthol, they altered the levels of nicotine. What do we see now in Colorado? Here's a new marijuana soda for newbies. This is what we're going to see. We're already seeing, quote, the science take over to attract and bring more people into the marijuana industry. When people say, Joe Camel, I tell people that they don't need Joe Camel here in the marijuana industry because of all the different types of products they have. This is what they didn't have during the Joe Camel days, is an entire website from the Denver Post dedicated to marijuana promotion. This article talks about dosing for newbies, so instructs people how to get into the marijuana use business. Again, important to remember that this whole commercialization began under medical. This is a quote from very, very long ago. NORML's a long-time legalization group talking about we'll use medical marijuana as a red herring to give marijuana a good name. We don't have time to go into it. Tonight's discussion is about commercial marijuana. There is actual basis for cannabis-based medicine, but we won't talk about that tonight. But just as a reminder, this is when commercialization began. Here's a medical site having free joint Friday. Here's a medical site with a 99-cent dancing joint. So you get the idea that commercialization has been going on well before the vote. So here are some of the things we'll talk about, that this was the voters' will to have commercialization. Prohibition didn't work. We're in a social experiment. Regulation makes us safer. It's safer than alcohol, and it's a moneymaker. What most people don't know is almost all the money for Amendment 64 came from out of state, more than 90%. 3 entities, the Marijuana Policy Project, the Drug Policy Alliance, and now deceased Peter Lewis, were the 3 funders that funded the majority of Colorado and Washington's legalization efforts. This was not an organic grassroots movement of Coloradans, but a decades-long strategy of a very small group of individuals and organizations. If commercialization was the voters' will, why were there no ads for commercialization? Why were there no ads for marijuana shops, gummy bears, cupcakes, and soda? If indeed commercialization what voters wanted, or what this was supposedly about. To date, we have more than 200 Colorado communities that have had a moratorium or a ban on marijuana retail. As you've heard, Arvada and Golden both had unanimous votes of their city council to oppose the commercialization, even though their communities had voted for Amendment 64. This is the makeup of the bans and moratoriums going on in the area that you can see. Denver, Aurora, and Boulder are areas that are using retail. So this is what we're seeing, as Ron had mentioned. The great news about what we're seeing in this room is what we are seeing around the state is we have wakened a sleeping giant. The Washington Post correctly urged DC voters to oppose legalization and correctly distinguish between decriminalization and commercialization. And so they also cited part of Colorado's experiences as reason for DC voters to hold off. Our new USA Today poll that just came out last week showing now 46% of likely voters support legalization, a 17% drop among Colorado voters. So as more people begin to wake up to what this was really about, which was commercialization and not some great social justice movement, I think more people are finding this is not what they wanted. We'll often hear the war on drugs is a failure, and I always ask, well, what do you mean by that? Because commercialized drugs by far are the most used drugs. Commercialized, regulated drugs, 4 times as many people use tobacco as marijuana, 7 times as many people use alcohol as marijuana. So really, when we're talking about a failure, was the failure including use rates? Would that be some of your criteria for deciding whether how we treat a drug is a failure? We can always do better in prevention and treatment for all drugs and should do better. The top chart you see are this is the 12 to 17-year-old use rates. The red you see are medical marijuana states, and the blue are states that do not have medical marijuana. And you can see where those reside as far as 12 to 17-year-old use rates. So again, as been reported, our schools are reporting more incidences with marijuana use. Our school resource officers are seeing more incidences, and students, again, obtaining them from different places. I think we all agree that parents have a responsibility. All of us have a responsibility to address any drug use. So city councils, parents, schools, we all need to work together. But our policies need to reflect those values. And this is the inverse relationship that we all fear. The bottom line is, as we lower perception of harm, we increase drug use. So you see that inverse relationship, especially as we look at our Colorado data. It's very concerning. The data on marijuana and mental health continues to grow. The impact on the youth and young adult brain is very real. Everything from loss of IQ, increasing developing psychosis, affecting memory and attention, all the things that doesn't help our children prepare for the 21st century workforce. In a recent study of casual marijuana users, Northwestern University looked at the brains of casual marijuana users, not persons using every day, and looked and showed brain issues with those that work on motivation and emotion, even those who said they did not feel they were having any sort of adverse effects of marijuana use. So that's really critical. And the publisher of that study said people think a little recreational use shouldn't cause a problem. If someone is doing okay at work or school, our data says that's not the case. This is one of the most recent studies. This is a longitudinal study that looked at teen use. They followed teens who used regularly and followed them to the age of 30. So those who were using regularly in their teens had a 60% less likely to graduate high school compared to those who never used the drug. 18 times more likely to become dependent on the drug, 7 times more likely to attempt suicide, 8 times more likely to use other illicit drugs later in life. So this, again, the science will catch up. Is the science the same as it is with tobacco? No. But this is the game of chase that we play with an industry. The goal of an industry is to cloud the science for as long as possible, keep regulators at bay and stay steps ahead of them. That's the game of chase we played with the tobacco industry. That's the game we want to prevent having to play with yet another industry. So again, addiction. A new study from Massachusetts General showing 40% of our young users showing signs of addiction. Again, very problematic. We're going to talk in a second. We're dealing with a very different world of marijuana than when I was young. Daily college marijuana smoking in this country is at a 30-year high. The vast majority of marijuana in our state is being sold to the daily user. They're consuming almost 70% of our marijuana. Again, and that rate, 21%, those who are considered regular marijuana users are those who use in the last 30 days. About 21% of those people, about 1 in 5, are consuming at least 26 days or more. So almost every day or more. That's very concerning. This is a whole new ballgame of people using more frequently, and we'll show you shortly, using very potent marijuana. When you hear that regulation makes us safer, why then do we have such high rates of use in Denver? These are Denver marijuana use rates, where their 8th grade marijuana use rate is almost 20%, almost 3 times the national average. According to the marijuana lobby, they should have the lowest use rates in the world, because that's the most regulated market in the world, because regulation is supposed to protect our children. So again, was talked earlier, we're seeing an increase in marijuana-related emergency room visits. They went up by 57% between 2011. We're now up to close to 13,000 marijuana-related ER visits in our state. Denver has a rate 50% higher than the state average. Marijuana ranked first in Denver drug-related hospital discharges, excluding alcohol. And again, it was an increase from 2011. Highway interdiction seizures of Colorado marijuana, the illegal shipment of marijuana, went up 397% between 2008 to 2013. And we also have more hash oil explosions in our state. We're seeing poisonings go up nationwide. We have that. And also was a study that looked at poisonings of youth to medical marijuana states and those that did not have medical marijuana states. And you can see the numbers for those that had it were much higher. Those who didn't have any sort of marijuana had no change in their calls to poison control. We have, again, Arapahoe House reporting 66% increase in teen marijuana admissions between 2011 and 2014. And also see 90% increase in marijuana as a secondary drug of choice for its adult clients. And since marijuana was legalized, the percent of clients who came in to Arapahoe on a DUI charge jumped from 8% to 14.7%. Again, when we look at this as a money winner, all of this costs us. That costs somebody. Colorado tests marijuana workers. We now have, from 2012 to 2013, there was a 20% uptick according to Quest Diagnostics in their tests of employees in Colorado. Nationwide, there's about a 6% increase and double-digit increases in Colorado and in Washington. We also now make one of the most potent marijuana in the world. If you talk to law enforcement, they'll tell you cartel marijuana is minor leagues to what we make now. Wasn't the market supposed to make us safer? Wasn't that the evil black market? Now we make more potent marijuana with commercialized marijuana. This chart tells you the trend we're on. The beginning of the chart is the 1960s and 70s. I grew up in the late 70s where marijuana, the THC content, this is seized marijuana, so this is black market marijuana, the THC content was about 3 and 4%. This doesn't even come close to telling what's happening in Colorado. You can find 20, 30% THC. You can get vaporized marijuana that can be 60 to 80% THC, 15 to 20 times stronger than the marijuana that was being smoked when I was in middle and high school. This is the new world. Hash oil is very potent, illegal in California, but we mass produce it here. Here's beautifully packaged hash oil, which again can be insanely potent, very high THC, and as this says, the high may last up to 5 hours. So does that make us safer? Are we safer now that we package and mass produce hash oil? This is one of the more dangerous worlds, is this collision of the vaporizing worlds. The nicotine and marijuana vaporizing worlds are evolving quickly, and the marijuana vaping world is steps ahead of the nicotine vaporizing world. Those are all marijuana vaporizers, and Snoop Dogg has his own line of vaporizers. So again, who is this targeting, and are we safer now? I don't remember cartel marijuana vaporizers. I don't remember them having branded products, and this is where we are now. Just like we had in tobacco, Hollywood glamorization of the product is part of the formula. The Rolling Stone magazine called these the iPod of getting baked. remembering that most of this is supposed to be for medical. Only a few states have legalized. These are all supposed to be for medical. Is baked a medical term? Do you walk into your pharmacy and they say, I've got some great pills for you to get really baked? And again, read what the Colorado marijuana warehouse person said. Being in Colorado, I can smoke it anywhere, it's so discreet. The marijuana vaping industry openly promotes the ability of people to smoke marijuana in these products and it won't be known by someone maybe standing next to you. That's why communities like Golden just passed their law to include vaporizing into their smoke-free law and expanded their smoke-free law. We have a vapor problem because now we have more than 250,000 youth who had never smoked a cigarette used e-cigarettes in 2013. This number reflects a threefold increase just since 2011. Sadly, the FDA is going to do little for the nicotine vaping world. You're going to have vaping commercials on TV. You'll have bubblegum juice. You'll have grape juice. You'll have all sorts of nicotine juice. Children and young adults today know this vapor world, and unfortunately, it's growing. This is one of the first vaporizers you'll see that now includes both, you can use e-juice, and also tells you can do hash oil in the vaporizer. These are vaporizers confiscated from Jefferson County High School students. This is another vaporizer, obviously trying to disguise itself as an asthma inhaler. And this is what we've made for kids today. They want us to believe, just like the tobacco industry said, well, Joe Camel's not targeting children. And they want us to believe that gummy bears, cupcakes, and soda are not about targeting children. We've never made marijuana use easier for children than we have today. All of those products can be consumed, and you won't know it. You're not going to smell it. The only way you'll know is the impairment in the child. We have over 18 types of gummy bears, 18 types of cookies, 23 chocolate bars. Do we really have to do this again? Do we really have to go on a chase of an industry to say, it tells us these are not about targeting children? That's the danger we have growing. I'll pass these around. Here are bought in Wheat Ridge stores. Here's a strawberry candy package. You can look at it, don't open it up. It's all been cleaned up, but don't open it up just in case any's left. Here is 100 milligrams of THC in this little bottle to be dropped into your drink. You can look at those, and I'll pass these around to council. So again, the recipe for drug use is simple. Increase accessibility and promotion of a drug, increase acceptance, and decreasing the harm perception. Drugs are money losers. When they say it's a social experiment, I laugh because no, we have experience actually legalizing a combustible drug in the United States. We actually have experience with that. And the theory of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana is the same. Most people start at their teen years, and these are money losers, and they make their money off the addicted. That's the formula. Just let me touch on a few things that I know Michael may bring up in his presentation. One, I think the slide got knocked out, but you'll hear that auto fatalities are down in our state. But what you may not hear is that THC-involved auto fatalities are up. What you also hear is that, well, people now with medical marijuana, there's fewer overdoses, opiate overdoses in our state. That study actually acknowledged, though, in the raw data that states with medical marijuana had higher rates. And also it should be known that this study that came out, a report came out following that study that showed that data released in 2013 said that Colorado ranks second worst from all states for prescription drug misuse. So the formula is really simple. This wasn't about social justice. This was about the commercialization. The decision before city councils locally has been about commercialization. It's not about home use. It's not about somebody using marijuana. And it's not about the law. Simply, as a community, it was about, do we want to commercialize and promote the product? That's what this is about. So my hope is, I appreciate you getting the information, and obviously we'll provide more in the coming days or weeks as your decision process goes, and I appreciate you listening to both sides of the issue and gathering the data that you need to look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Still have 1 minute.
What's that?
Still have 1 minute.
No, I have 1 minute and 10 seconds.
Okay.
I'll pass this around too. This is the.
Do you want to answer questions?
Yes, questions.
Questions.
After the next one.
All right, after, we're going to have our second presentation, and then we'll have questions for either of the gentlemen of the both presentations, okay?
Madam Mayor, for the record, his samples are here. No, nobody took them on council. They're right here.
Thanks for watching that, Mr. DiTullio. I'm going to call Mike Elliott. Mike is with the Marijuana Trade Association, and he's also a member of the Jefferson County Task Force on Marijuana. Oh, is this vapor pens? Yeah. Here we go. What's this? More stuff.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Michael Elliott. I'm the Executive Director of the Marijuana Industry Group. We are a trade association of the licensed marijuana businesses here in the state of Colorado. And I was very thankful to receive a request earlier today to come and make this presentation. What I prepared for you today is really, this is a copy of the Jefferson County Marijuana Task Force report, the argument about why they should opt in. I apologize I didn't have time to tailor it here to Wheat Ridge, but the arguments are pretty much the same. And so if you would, I will go through the report, and it's a little bit lengthy. It's just about 90 pages. But I'll tell you, it's 10 pages of report and 80 pages of appendix. And so I'll go through this with you because it's not quite as intimidating as it might first appear. But let me go ahead and make a few opening arguments, and then I'll jump into this report. So to my trade association again, we as a licensed trade association, we're a 501c6, just like a chamber of commerce. We formed back in 2010, and we did so basically to create a comprehensive, robust regulatory framework for marijuana. Now, the quick history is that we had marijuana dispensaries before we had licensing and regulation here in Colorado. In the year 2009, when President Obama was inaugurated, the language that we got from the federal government was low law enforcement priority. And there was a big argument about what exactly that meant, but regardless, hundreds of businesses opened up across the state of Colorado. And at that time, there was no real controls for the businesses. There were dispensaries, but there wasn't licensing. And it looks, that back in 2009 in Colorado looks a lot like what California has right now, where there are some local controls, there are some local licensing in California, but distinguishing between a legit business and a black market operator in California is a very difficult thing to do. In fact, they often look like the exact same thing. So what we did in Colorado in 2010 was we passed House Bill 1284, and that created the first licensing and regulatory framework for the sale of medical marijuana that really the world has ever seen. It created this regulatory framework. It required state and local licensing, and it also gave every community the local option, the ability to allow or ban medical marijuana businesses. Now, the city attorney touched on many of the biggest and best aspects of our regulatory program, and we've been developing this over the last 4 years. At the moment, we have about 500 pages of state marijuana law and rules. It is enormous. It is a lot. We've been building and building and building. And part of what my group has done is we've been at the state capitol, and we've been working with the Colorado Department of Revenue, and specifically the Marijuana Enforcement Division, on how do we make this program comprehensive, responsible, accountable, transparent, safe. And so a lot of the issues that have come up here today, we've been working on. Edibles, for instance, we have about 70 new pages of edibles, of rules on edibles that have just been going through the regulatory process and really just need a finalized signature by the executive director of the Department of Revenue, which is supposed to happen here by the end of the month. And those rules are essentially banning those high-potency edibles that were just brought up as a concern. And I'll tell you that all of that happened with the industry and the regulators and community citizens working together and basically saying, you know what, it really is a bad idea to have 10 doses of marijuana in one cookie. That's an awful idea. And it was happening, and here we are here addressing it. And that's what we've been doing time and again. To give you a few more of the highlights, we have ownership requirements. And this is to get that state license, you have to have, there's a certain amount of ownership requirements. One is you have to be a 2-year resident of Colorado. 2, you have to pass a background check with felony restrictions. You have to do the financial disclosures, and this is all mirrored after actually the gaming rules. The Department of Revenue also regulates the gaming industry, and these financial disclosure rules were mirrored off of the casinos in making sure that the mafia was locked out. And that has been, the idea here. Is the idea really, that this is, I guess I'll make to you my central argument for you to hear today. That the real choice is we've had 45 years of this war on marijuana. The Controlled Substances Act was passed in 1970, 45 years. Has it worked? We've spent over $1 trillion on this. Has it worked? Because marijuana has been universally available in our communities, in our schools, despite all of that money, despite best intentions. That has been the reality. So the question that I believe is for the City Council is, who would you rather have selling it? Would you rather it be someone like Al Capone, someone who has organized crime and uses violence to dominate the marketplace, where there's turf battles? Or would you rather it be a licensed, regulated, controlled, secure, accountable, and taxed business? And that is the choice that we believe is before you today. And we would urge you to go with the licensed, regulated, controlled framework, because the fact of the matter is the businesses here are part of this community and want to make this program work. And we are willing to come to the table and compromise and listen to concerns and figure out ways to address problems that arise. We've been doing it for 4 years. Let me touch on taxes for a minute, because Proposition AA was on the ballot November of last year. That created a special sales tax and a special excise tax on the sale of marijuana here in Colorado. As a trade association, we endorsed it, we helped fund it, and I was one of the lead spokespeople going out in favor of Proposition AA. It's kind of a unique position for a representative of an industry saying, hey, voters, raise taxes on us. And we did that, and it passed. And why we did this is because we want there to be tax money to make this work. We want money to be available to do prevention efforts to keep this out of schools, to keep our roads safe, to make sure that law enforcement has all the resources that they need, and overall to make sure, in particular, that the State Department of Revenue, that Marijuana Enforcement Division, that they have all of the resources they need to license the businesses and to do enforcement, strict enforcement, to make sure that the child-resistant packaging is happening, that all that packaging is opaque, that all the labeling is being done right. Testing, we're going to a new world of testing, where we're testing for potency and harmful contaminants like mold, mildew, E. coli, salmonella, and a lot more. No one has ever done this before in the history of the world. A drug cartel has never cared about whether mold or pesticides or something poisonous is in the marijuana that they're selling. We do. And we, as an industry, are having to pay for it. It's one of the reasons why these businesses are extraordinarily expensive to run. Because not only are we paying extremely high licensing fees, which all those licensing fees go to make sure this program is working, to make sure this program is paying for itself. We have the increased taxes, but also the security that we heard so much about, the alarm systems, the limited access areas, mandatory video surveillance, and the seed-to-sale tracking program. Now, the seed-to-sale tracking program is put in place so that the marijuana that's at these licensed facilities is under video surveillance the entire time, and it's being inputted into the seed-to-sale tracking program. All the weights, all of the changes, all the times it's moved, all of that is tracked, and it's done on a daily basis. And so the Department of Revenue, the enforcement officers there, are able to look at the business every single day and look for whatever's fishy. And if there is not accounting of that, well, those businesses can get fined, they can have their license suspended, and they can get shut down. And all of that has been happening here. We've seen a lot of businesses just straight up shut down. And you know what you're going to hear from the industry is good. Good. Because this is a very difficult industry to be a part of, but we are leading the world. And we have to hold ourselves up to a very high standard of responsibility. And that means complying with the law. Even when it's expensive, even when it's stressful, even when it's cumbersome, this is the reality that we live in, and it's an industry that we've agreed to become part of it and to make this work. So let me hit up on this report. So as I said, the first 10 pages are the report, 70 pages or so of appendix. If you would, jump to page 11 and then go to the next page. That's the appendix. And I want to show you what I shared with you here today. I'm sorry I don't have it for the audience. But I want to hit on some of the major, I'll start off with some of the safety issues that have been brought up here today. So if you'll see, this is page 27 of the appendix. This is where it starts talking about teen marijuana use. So you get to page 27, and what you're going to see here is a press release from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. That's our state public health it's our State Department of Public Health and Environment. If you get to page 28 there, I have a line highlighted for you. 30-day marijuana use fell from 22% in 2011 to 20% in 2013. That is a 2% drop in the state's teen marijuana use rate. If you go to the next page, what you're going to see here is data from the Center for Disease Control. This is the federal agency that keeps track of teen marijuana use. And what you're going to see here on page appendix 29 is the drop that happened also in Colorado from 2009 to 2011, from 24.8% to 22%. In other words, in the last 4 years, we have seen almost a 5% decrease in teen marijuana use in our state of Colorado. During that 4 years, we licensed about 500 medical marijuana centers, and we legalized marijuana for the entire state. This is the state data and the national data. This is objective data. And I know it gets very concerning when we start hearing about expulsions and suspensions and whatnot. The problem with all that is the variable, and that is enforcement. And enforcement has been going up. And why is enforcement going up? Because you all care about teen marijuana use. Because the schools care about teen marijuana use. Enforcement's going up right now, and that means more kids are getting in trouble, but it does not mean that teen marijuana use is going up. This data, objective data, is actually showing the inverse, a 5% decrease in 4 years. Let me go to traffic fatalities and hit on that for a minute. This would be appendix page 3. What I have here is a series. One is a Washington Post article, and then I have the actual data from the Colorado Department of Transportation and something from the Colorado State Patrol. And what you're going to see here is massive decreases in traffic fatalities in our state. The Washington Post article is titled, "Since Marijuana Legalization, Highway Fatalities in Colorado are at near historic lows." I'd urge you to take a longer look at this. But here is the basic justification for it. There is a great study out there right now from the University of Colorado at Denver, Professor Daniel Reese, which is making the case that states that have reformed their marijuana laws have seen a trend, and that trend is lower traffic fatality rates. And that is a decrease that's going faster than the national decrease, because there is a national decrease going right now as well, but that the marijuana states are going faster. Why? They put out a theory. Why? Because there's less drunk driving going on. I'd urge you to take a look at this, because Bob Doyle did bring up the fact that more people are being found with marijuana in their blood with the traffic fatality rates. Well, that is true. The problem with that, though, is it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Why it doesn't mean anything is because, one, we are looking for it more, and just because we're finding it more does not mean that traffic fatalities are going to be going up. The other issue with it is, I just lost my train of thought. The other point was really good, though, too. Let me jump on. Crime. This is on page 2, Denver crime data. Homicides and sexual assaults are down. This is coming off of the Denver City website. It's actually a pretty significant drop in homicides and sexual assaults. Now, all this safety stuff, you know, there is a certain amount of uncertainty here. We are in a vastly new world, but I will bring up this to you. It gets back to my central point. This is a choice between Al Capone and let's throw out a name. Let's throw out John Hickenlooper as a name. A guy who owned Wine Coop Brewery, started one of the first brew pubs here in the state of Colorado. Licensed, regulated, taxed, accountable. That is the choice. And when you look at these safety issues, when you choose licensed, regulated businesses over black market entities, you can see increases in safety. I think the homicide rate there, we don't know. But at the very least, I think what we've shown, what I'm showing here with this data, is that the sky is falling predictions of the opponents of all this are not true. When you look at the objective data, we are not seeing these public safety disasters. In fact, when you look at low traffic fatalities, decreasing teen use, decreasing homicide rates, this is great news. It's absolutely great news. Let me jump to the economy for a few minutes. Really starting here on page 49 of the appendix. There's a lot I gave you here. Business Insider just named Colorado the fastest growing economy in the entire country. Out of 50 states, Colorado is number 1. We also just had a record tourism season, our best tourism season in our history. Denver just had its best tourism season in its history. The ski industry just had its best tourism season in its history. Here on page 55 is numbers from the Colorado Department of Revenue showing that there are 10,000 jobs in the marijuana industry. That does not include all of the other jobs for the folks not in the industry. And right now I'm talking about jobs for construction workers, electricians, carpenters, plumbers, security. I don't want to forget the attorneys, of course. Lots of work for attorneys. Law enforcement, and more. Then we should hit up real estate. Denver's ranking as a top market to watch for commercial real estate. Estimates from, this is coming from one of the chambers of commerce, 5 million square feet of commercial real estate. Rock bottom vacancy rates. Record construction activity in Denver. I'm going through the appendix here. All of this is in here. I urge you to go and read this stuff yourself.
I have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Time goes by fast. The final thing I have on here is dispensaries not linked to neighborhood crime. I would urge you to check that one out as well. We have extraordinarily security measures put into place, these video surveillance. We've actually had cops show up to our dispensaries saying, hey, did you catch that hit and run guy that drove by your dispensary? We're looking for a license plate. And coming up with my last couple minutes here, I would start here. Banning marijuana businesses is not going to solve all the problems that have been articulated here. Marijuana has been bought and sold in this community, and it's going to stay that way. The first place that I saw marijuana in my life was when I was a middle schooler in Colorado Springs in the 1990s. Where did that marijuana come from? Well, it came from the black market. And the black market has been very good about saturating and meeting every possible inroad that they can have. And that's going to continue. I think the question right now is, do you want to control it and regulate it and get that tax revenue and apply it to the safety issues that people here are concerned about? Because that's something that the industry can get behind. I would also throw out that other localities were interviewed for this Jefferson County Marijuana Task Force report, including Edgewater, and there are some really great interviews that are featured in this report, and I'll give you the gist of it. We haven't been seeing a lot of problems. The licensing fees that, banks and liquor stores have been more problematic than dispensaries. I'll end with this. I started off by saying that this is an industry that cares about this community. and cares about being reasonable and finding reasonable paths forward. There's a lot that's going on right now that we don't even support. I mean, there are a lot of compromises to be made for advertising restrictions. I got to tell you, sign flippers are incredibly annoying. And one of the things my group did in Denver was lead the effort to ban marijuana sign flippers, and did so while a whole bunch of people were saying there's free speech issues. Well, we said, you know what? We don't need that. It's too slapping people in their face. And I guess I would urge this conversation to take place because, clubs. I don't see people here that are very sympathetic to the clubs either.
Your time is up, or within 5 minutes or 5 seconds.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. If you have questions about the report, feel free to email or call me, and I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Is Bob still here? Okay, I see him.
Should I
All
stay
right,
up here?
this would be the opportunity for council to ask questions of the two speakers. Genevieve?
So, Mr. Elliott, what are the harms that you see from the product itself for people that are users?
Well, we should start off by acknowledging that we have thousands of years of marijuana use and not one instance of overdosing on marijuana. Now, that said, it's not harmless. Marijuana can cause impairment, which means traffic safety is an important issue. It's why our trade association has actually partnered with CDOT on the Heat is On campaign. And if you go to a lot of the marijuana stores, you're going to see the CDOT posters urging people to not use marijuana and drive. For kids, I'll also acknowledge this is not for kids. I think that a lot of the studies that were posted today have been overblown, but nonetheless, this is not for kids. And I do get back to the point of kids have access to this already. We have the opportunity now to license and regulate and control it, take a bite out of the black market, and use that tax revenue to address teen marijuana use.
If it's not for children, then I guess I'm not understanding why it's in gummy bears, cotton candy, and the products that would appeal to children.
The reason, the very simple reason, is that adults like gummy bears.
She just said that.
And I'm sorry to say that, but I'm not exactly proud of the gummy bears either. The fact is, though, that the businesses have found that the gummy bears are pretty much the or one of the most profitable, popular items that they have in their entire stores because adults want them. Now, what we as an industry have done about edibles has been child-resistant packaging that's opaque, the labeling requirements, the potency requirements, the testing requirements. Now, that might not be good enough. And I'll sit here and tell you today, it might not be good enough. It's why there's a debate right now going on about how do we actually mark the gummy bears with something that shows that it has marijuana in it. That conversation is going on right now. It was a bill that was passed by the state legislature this last year.
Other questions? Our job here tonight is that staff has requested general policy direction and consensus from council. Based on the level of consensus, staff could provide more detailed regulatory options for council consideration by the October 13th special study session or October 20th regular study session. Mr. DiTullio.
So I wanted to clarify one thing. With Wheat Ridge High School, what I was trying to point I was making is that when administrators are looking at alcohol or drugs, they do have our SRO with them. That's the question that was asked by Mr. Urban. So our police department in Wheat Ridge is very active. I have to compliment our SROs being active in the schools, that when this happens, the city knows about it, and we have some great SROs. So that was my point. Administrators are doing it, the police are doing it, and that's been my observation every time there's a weapon, drugs, or alcohol or weed. So I wanted to clarify that for the ex-principal of Lakewood. So one of the things I wanted to recommend tonight, and I had passed this out to City Council, was that based on the comments tonight and based on the information that we've heard, there's no way that we could actually address a lot of these issues by November 16th. And one of the recommendations I had is that we would extend our moratorium past November 16th for another 90 days to at least allow council to have a few more study sessions through the holidays and through January. I think that would take us to discuss some of these issues. So that would have to be a first and second reading. We can't do that tonight, but we'd have to bring it forth. So that would be one of my recommendations, that we would extend our current moratorium an additional 90 days via ordinance, which is a first and second reading, and that would take it way past November 16th. So that's one recommendation I have.
Okay, some discussion on that?
I would be in favor of extending the moratorium, especially given the information received tonight and also being able to study this in more depth.
Right.
And given the fact that we've gone through this sort of moratorium iteration in previous months, extending it and giving us the time to develop a adequate policy, I think would be appropriate.
I don't know that we can extend it because it's being an
And
emergency.
excuse me, I don't mean to use that word. I mean to install a separate moratorium.
Be by ordinance, first and second reading.
Okay,
We have to direct staff to bring it forth, though.
okay. Other discussion on that concept?
I would support that we absolutely, according to what Chief Brennan suggested, that further study is needed, that obviously our citizens are concerned about this, and that obviously we need to look at this as a city, as where we want to go, how we want this to look like for Wheat Ridge. So when further study is needed, do we need to put together a panel like other cities did? Do we need to put together a panel of principals, of law enforcement, of medical personnel to look at this for Wheat Ridge, or what does it mean?
Okay, that's an interesting, so you're suggesting maybe a group of assorted authorities or knowledgeable people, sort of a panel that the council then could use as a reference as we look at this further?
So I guess my consent, sorry.
No, I'm saying, do we have time for that?
It sounds like if we create another moratorium, that would be a possibility. Mr. Fitzgerald?
So my consensus from here would be that we would have direct staff to bring forth a ordinance for first and second reading to extend our current moratorium 90 more days past November, starting at November 16th, and then extending it from there 90 more days. That would be my consensus, separate from the panel or anything else.
Which the panel could take place during that moratorium as a study, sort of a system that we could use.
So this, the extension would get us through the holidays, get us through probably January, and then we could actually be discussing this in the meantime. So that's my consensus on that.
Any more discussion? So what we're looking at here is a consensus of actually creating another moratorium, if I'm understanding this correctly. And during that time, we can create a panel, an informational gathering.
I don't know, what does everybody else think about creating a panel to discuss this further?
I think that's a separate issue from this one.
It is. Yeah, so at this point, do I have a consensus on creating another moratorium? That's where I need, and I'm getting.
Madam Mayor, you can ask for a raise of hands.
All right, could I get a raise of hands for that? All right, that sounds pretty, all right, so that would be our recommendation to staff.
We'll bring back an ordinance on October 13th on first reading and October 27th on second reading.
That would be fine.
And that will extend
So we
it.
will create another moratorium, which would then, how does that work as far as, does this one,
This one will start after the emergency expires.
okay, all right, which gives us ample time to get the work done.
Yes.
And I'm hearing 90 more days, is that right? That's correct. Okay.
Is that the general?
Is there a longer length of time that's available?
It's completely up to you. With
That's
a regular
available,
ordinance,
right, whatever
emergency
you
ordinances can only be in effect for 90 days, but regular ordinances, it's whatever time period you choose.
So I'm hearing 90 days as being a respectful time for everybody who's waiting to see, existing businesses as well as our citizens.
And you always have the opportunity, of course, to further extend, because you will have done a regular ordinance, so anytime during that 90 days, you could direct that another ordinance be brought forward extending that date.
Okay. All right, So we've got that decided. I don't know that we need to decide something else tonight.
I had one more. I just had one more, and I think this is a no-brainer, but you'll be the decider. I think that I've read and talked about and seen that there's a new product or new tool out there. They're marijuana vending machines, and they use a credit card or an ID card to actually buy edibles and buy marijuana. And I think it's a problem that we could have in the city, especially at the current locations. I know they're expensive machines, and I don't think we have any in the city of Wheat Ridge yet, but I think we could be proactive and take care of that as an ordinance and bring that forth. So I just want to throw that out, that do we want to look at banning the marijuana vending machines in the city now proactively and kind of cut that off before, head it off at the pass? That was about my other question to council.
Mr. Pond?
I guess I'd just like a little bit more information, either from Mr. DiTullio or from staff, as to what the issue is and whether or not it's already within our ordinances or codes to handle this or not.
I doubt that it is. You allow, the question would be whether those machines are located in a licensed retail marijuana center. When you think about it, you only allow the retail sale in centers. So it wouldn't be that you'd find them in a hotel lobby or something. That's not a licensed retail marijuana center. So the extent of their use under our present regulatory system would probably be limited, I would guess. And if you're already in a center, I don't know if they would want to use a vending machine in addition to just counter sales.
Well, my concern is that what I've read and talked to other experts about is that you can take a Colorado ID, driver's license, and you can swipe it, and it actually reads the ID. It can confirm you're over 21. But if you steal a driver's license or an ID, or someone gives you their license or ID, it's the modern day way of asking the guy to go in the store and buy alcohol, but they can use their driver's license. So that's my only concern.
We can have staff look into it as part of our future discussions.
That would be
Bring
good,
back some
because it
recommendations.
sounds like questionable whether that's something we can do.
Sure, if it's being done out there, we can do
We
it.
would like to cover in addition to the ordinance. Mr. Starker?
You know, I took a look this morning at the regulations on the Colorado State regulatory website, and there are a number of pages and some very detailed ordinances and rules and regulations that may or may not be part of our local governing ordinances. And to the extent that they're not part of our local governing ordinances, our police powers are diminished in regulating those activities. Some of that might be the sign spinning, the balloons, the opaque packaging, and some of those things. I think we should direct staff, and I would make a consensus that we direct staff to look through those ordinances, find out what it would make sense for us to be able to regulate this product in our community.
Is that,
Well, I just want to discuss, how many counties, how many municipalities have said no more? How many municipalities have stood up and said, let's stop and take a look at what's going on? And if we put together a panel to look at that for Wheat Ridge during the moratorium and to come back and say, this is the information that we have, do we even want to go forward with more licenses in Wheat Ridge?
if there's a moratorium in existence, I don't believe we're able to, are we?
Well, not during the moratorium, but what is our consensus on what do we think we're doing going forward?
I think that's for us as a council, sorry,
part
to
of the panel
decide as a part of the
discussion and
process.
Correct.
And I do think as a part of the panel, I think again, like we had tonight, you need to have both sides, because I think
absolutely,
one side has their viewpoint, the other side has all very good viewpoints. But, and I think the other thing we have to remember, and so that we don't, in the city of Wheat Ridge, we've set up buffer zones, and I know good, bad, indifferent, but I think we've already talked about that there's very little, it's not as if based off of the buffer zones that we're open for business to open up 6, 8, 10 more marijuana stores. I mean, I think based off of what staff has vocalized is there's maybe one based off the buffer zones that could fit and in, you know, the areas. So it's not as if there's going to be 17 more coming into our community. I mean, again, I think it's something we need to decide in this 90, 120 days, whatever we have left. But you know, for a and get more information.
We've got a couple of things going on here. Mr. Starker had a point. Wasn't really an official motion, and we couldn't do a motion anyway. But I'm sorry.
I'm going to speak to his motion.
All right, and Mr. Fitzgerald is going to speak to that.
But just to clarify, the laws that you looked at are in force right now in Wheat Ridge, but they're applied by the state. So what you're asking is that we adopt some of those so that we would have police powers. Is that the point?
Yes, sir.
Can I have some more conversation on that? And Mr. DiTullio agrees with that? Can we have a show of hands on that? All right, is that understood?
Yep, got that noted.
Now, there was a couple other points that were made.
Well, just to Christie's point about, because I remember when we were told that before, that due to our buffer zones, we're almost built out. And that's how 38th and Miller happened. How did that possible store come up? And that's what I'm concerned about. What other locations are out there that we don't know about, that if things happen, that what other stores are out there available? I mean, are we looking at 3? Are we looking at 5? And where are they? And that's what I would like to know going forward.
Mr. Pond, do you have comment on that?
I do. I think those are great points, and I certainly want to acknowledge everyone who's come tonight, and especially the folks who have come specifically because of some of those issues of buffering and locations that that have become, through changing of businesses, have become available by our existing codes. And so I do think that we should continue to look at this. Just like we've said, I support something that's been already brought up, which is a special use, studying a special use process for this. And this was brought up in the staff report, and this was brought up a few weeks ago at the last study session. I think that's very important. I think during that process, we should obviously look geographically at the existing zoning overlays, radii, and everything that puts in place. I know, frankly, because I've studied that no, 3 or 5 cannot physically exist in our current situation. Obviously, though, in our current regulations, there is businesses who can come and go, and then geographically that creates different opportunities. And I do think we should obviously acknowledge that we have to do a more thorough job of understanding the impacts of on the community, putting ourselves out as decision makers and trying to listen to everyone and then make wise decisions. So again, I think all your questions are fair. I think we should absolutely, over the next 100 days or so, be able to study that. I do think what's already been brought up in terms of the special use process allows us to have that discussion as a current lay of the land issue, but also looking forward, understand how we can make, I think, very legitimate criteria for making decisions that don't adversely impact our communities.
I'm going to go with Mr. Urban.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, there was a discussion in the early part of the evening regarding whether or not we would have the legal ability to ban existing stores from operating. And there was some discussion by staff, but then also one of the proponents mentioned that they had provided you with a letter. Can you provide us an update on that? And this may be something we need to discuss at length at a later date, and that's fine, but I just want to kind of understand the differences between those 2 points of view.
Sure. I received that letter. Honestly, the statute that Mr. Foster, I think, mentioned is statute was passed 10, 15 years ago. I was actually at the Municipal League when it passed and lobbied against that bill. It went ahead and passed anyhow, but it was really driven by the amortization of non-conforming mobile home parks in Aurora generated that statute. And as usual with statutes, there's always like a single kind of fact pattern that, and then we end up with a statewide statute, but it's in statute, and it says you don't amortize uses. However, with respect to retail marijuana, the Constitution passed much later, constitutional amendment, specifically says that yes, local governments can prohibit retail marijuana operations either by citizen initiative or by council action. And I conclude that despite the fact that you have issued licenses, to say that that statute precludes you from exercising the constitutionally granted power to prohibit, the statute has to fail in that context. And I know there are some cities that are relying on that position. With respect to medical marijuana, the statute, interestingly, says that you can prohibit. It's kind of the same question at a statutory level. You've got a later enacted specific statute that says you may prohibit, as against a statute passed 15 years ago that says you can't amortize. And the later statute's going to have to control theirs as well. There's a provision in the Constitution on medical marijuana Mr. Foster cited, but he failed to go on and quote the rest of it, which is that it only relates to taking away property that has been seized by the local agency. And it was put in the Constitution to deal with police agencies, departments seizing plants, and that you needed to give them back. And police departments kind of reacted to that in various administrative ways I won't bore you with, but that's really the context of that constitutional provision. I won't take more time than to tell you, you have the right to prohibit. If that does mean that you choose to prohibit with respect to existing facilities, you may do so. You may well choose to have a time frame for that, but you have that right.
We've got two subjects going on here. We've got the question brought up by these two, by Genevieve and Mr. Pond, as well as you've started another subject here. Let's finish one of these. And Mr. DiTullio, were you going to aid in the system with that?
I'd like to address Mr. Pond's comments. I think that even though I was born in Colorado, I'm from the Show Me State, more or less, and so I'd like to go to the next step and see that the special use permit process have staff bring it forth on paper so we can actually look at it at a study session and say, does this make sense, or do you want to tweak it? Because conceptually we saw it tonight, but I think the next step would be as we're going through these study sessions and this extension of the moratoriums, that we could at least look at a special use process on paper, draft it up, and then we could say, well, tweak it here, don't tweak it here. Maybe we won't even use it. But would you be willing to, Mr. Pond, at least have direct staff to bring it forth so at that study session we could look at it and feel it and see it and talk about it?
As a part of that suggestion, there was also the recommendation from Ms. Wooden as far as kind of buffer zones, looking at what areas would be possible to put marijuana locations, or so I think that needs to be a part of it so that we have a comprehensive idea of what else could be going forward. I know we're throwing a lot at you, but there's a lot more to do.
No, we have that mapped already, and we've provided those maps to council in the past, but we'll bring those back at a
As to
future
what's
study
available
session. And
going forward.
Yep.
And then
On that specific point with the special use permit, what concerned me about the presentation that was provided today was that there was an element in that process that allowed an administrative approval of a shop at any particular location if nobody was going to object. I'm pretty sure the citizens would object given the audience today, but I want to make sure that that doesn't fall under the radar, that some location ends up being administratively approved. I would like to see each application brought before council just because it is such a sensitive issue.
have we, okay, we've got more.
During the moratoriums that we're in and the next one that we're going to be having, is it open for discussion among council that an ordinance be brought forward for no new licenses?
Sure, I think anything's on the
Something
table.
we can discuss.
Yeah, the pendency of a moratorium
I'm just
doesn't do
wondering
that.
if the special use permit is the consensus that I'm hearing, or I'm just wondering what our discussion is going to be. Is it going to be special use, or are we going to consider no new licenses?
Mr. Pond.
Well, no, I'm not barring the conversation personally. in other words, I'm happy to sit up here and have the conversation about prohibition. I would like to do that in the context of these other tools and these other things that we're doing. So I guess that's to say, I assume in some ways that we are going to have that conversation. I don't know where that goes or not, but I think I'm not interested in having that conversation absent of some of the other pieces, which, again, it just happens to be my point of view that are extensions of the kind of land use codes that we've put in place, that I think have been indicated, by the way, through the presentations tonight, as being fairly restrictive and well thought out, and certainly not perfect. And I think it's absolutely fair to acknowledge the fact that we haven't gotten everything right, and we need to keep talking about it. So I think I'm willing to talk about that in conjunction with these other tools.
And Mr. DiTullio, I had.
Oh, well, I guess when you talk about ban, we have 6 in the city of Wheat Ridge right now. Based on the data from the police chief, there's not a lot of problems with those based on the alarms, and it's minor infractions of things happening that would happen to liquor stores or convenience stores. I guess a ban would have to be include that the ones that are here can stay, that we're not going to ban them completely and close them down like Mr. Dulles said that we can do. I think that they've proven to be good business owners. And I think the other thing is that I would like to see those locations be able to have a new owner and a new business if they sold. I just don't see a ban saying you can't have any more, and by the way, the ones that are here have to go, because I don't think that's, to me, ethical or fair to the ones that have actually opened up here, spent the money, and are doing the right things for the right reasons. So a ban would have to be, for me, not to ban the ones that are here and not to close them down. Or if they wanted to sell and then somebody wanted to come in, maybe that's where the special use permit kicks in for those new businesses. So our limit, I guess, in the city would be 6 places, like we have billboards. We limit the number of billboards in the city. It'd be the same type of thing. One takes over and one loses. That'd be the kind of process you have.
I believe the suggestion was about banning further, not as much as closing down.
I just wanted to know that a ban on any new licenses would be part of our conversation during the moratorium.
Right. And I think we're in agreement on that.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
On that aspect of it, I think it's important that as we discuss that, we understand the unintended consequences of this, because in my mind, it seems like a sweetheart deal to those that are existing to say, we're not going to allow any more competition for you. And I'm not suggesting that we encourage any more business in Wheat Ridge, but I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of creating some kind of automatic monopoly for the existing businesses, thereby making them bigger or what have you. So I appreciate the benefits of that aspect, but I want to know what are some of the unintended consequences of us eliminating the competition, or even the possibility of competition to keep them on their toes and keep them in our good graces so that they know that they could be replaced by somebody else.
And Mr. Fitzgerald has a comment?
Yeah, I agree with Councilman DiTullio. I would never vote to ban existing businesses. And since we've all had the map, we've looked at that map 2 or 3 times, and we know that there's not very many places, if any, where additional places can go. That kind of a ban turns out to be more theater than reality, because there just aren't any more places.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how many times I'm allowed to speak. The issue with the map, and I agree, we'd seen the map several times, but the issue with the map came up out of the blue at 38th and Miller with the other one that closed down, and then that opened up the location. And that's what caused some of the issues we're seeing right now. And so that's what I'm concerned about, is are we going to map out, okay, there's one here and one here. Is that what we're going to look at? Or are we going to look at these overlays and then something happens with another one and all of a sudden we have another surprise again? That's what I'm concerned about.
Mr. Pond.
Well, okay, so I do want to, I agree 100% that people were surprised, and that's why there's a lot of people in the room and have been in the rooms. And I agree with that 100%. And but it didn't happen out of the blue. It happened within our code. It happened as a use by right for a piece of property, and that's it. I mean, the code allowed it, and a business closed. The buffer zones of 3/4 of a mile between businesses then allowed for a certain parcel, not just one, but probably a large handful of C1 zone properties in a certain area, then to become for this use by right to become applicable. And so it wasn't out of the blue so much as it was a course of doing business within the rights of these property owners. The special use permit process, I think, at least has an immediate answer for that, because it doesn't create an immediate use by right. It creates a use by special permit, and thereby creates a safety net for communication, for public outreach. And I hope everyone goes and reads the special use requirements in our code, chapter 26, that lay out any applicant would have to come and conduct a pre-application neighborhood meeting. So that, again, I think you're right 100%, but I think that's why I'm encouraging of this process, because it creates something that cannot be out of the blue. And again, I don't believe that's what happened here, but I do believe people were surprised. I'm sure of that. And I do think we need to protect for that.
All right, Mr. DiTullio.
So, Madam, does council have a problem with a draft of the ordinance coming forth at a study session from staff, so we could actually see it and talk about it? And on the other issues that we've talked about too, I'm not limiting it to that, but I mean, the special use permit is complicated, especially for new people to look at. So if we had something to look at and read and say, okay, this makes sense for the future establishments, Ms. Wooden, would that help too, to see it actually written down? Because it helps me out, because I can't remember all the different nuances of it.
I would agree that it's important for us to read it, because if it's complicated, we'll probably need Ken to explain it to us. But I think also during this conversation of special use and everything else, I think we should figure out what are the benefits to more licenses in Wheat Ridge? And are the benefits money? Are we saying that money, what are the benefits that we feel that we could say to a citizen, these are why we feel we need more licenses, if we're going to go to special use permit and if we're going to go that route? And so, because we have so many people very concerned about that, and because so many other cities have said, no, we don't want it, and I've been told many times the ship has sailed, and now the ship doesn't have very many ports to go to.
I agree.
And it's interesting to me, and it's something I think we should look at, and I just want it to be part of the conversation.
Well, and I agree, and I've never supported this because of money or taxes, because it doesn't generate that much. I've looked at freedom of enterprise and entrepreneurship and that type of thing. It's not about tax dollars. It never has been about tax dollars, for me anyway. I'll say that publicly.
I think we're coming to a conclusion, but that we do want to look at
What I've got down is bring an ordinance extending the moratorium 90 days. Consensus direct us to staff to create a draft of the special use permit process.
Right.
And directing staff to do an ordinance locally adopting selected portions of the state regulations. They're quite thick. You don't want them all in the book.
Got it.
But I think we can work with the police department to determine what that would be helpful to them to have as a local enforcement right into municipal court. That's what I have as my notes.
And review the map again.
Review the map again.
Okay.
Determine what locations could be.
All right, got that?
I'd like to ask that, I understand in the current special use process, there's a notification requirement that extends to 600 feet for properties adjacent and near the applicant property. What I'd like to request is that we look at extending that radius to a quarter mile or more, so that we make sure that if especially for this type of use, that a larger segment of the population is notified that this application is being made. And I think that to Genevieve's point about trying to make the case whether we need any more pot shops in Wheat Ridge, I don't want to have to make that case. I think as an applicant that wants to use a particular property, that's their row to hoe to tell us that we need more than that. I don't think that we as council need to be making that argument. I think as the special use process comes up, if a person feels like we need more, they need to make that case to us. I don't want to make that case for them. And so that's why I find benefit in the special use process, because the onus is on that owner to tell us that we need more, and all it takes is a vote of council to say no.
I think most of these discussions will ensue as we get to these particular items. What I'm looking for now, are there anything else that we want staff to bring to us so that we may debate it properly and look at each portion of our, what sounds like increased regulations or whatever decision we make? Is there any other areas we want to cover? Okay? Is staff comfortable?
Got it all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very
Council.
much. I believe we can bring this to a conclusion and thank very much our two guests who spoke, Bob Doyle and Mike Elliott. You were very informative and very helpful for all of us. I believe that's it.
Means adjourned.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you so much for coming.